Hi, my name's Aurelia, and this isn't just a story about a ripped dress. It's about the sister who smiled while tearing it, in front of 300 people. It's about the parents who called her the real star, even as I stood beside them, invisible. It's about the room full of guests who clapped for a lie they didn't care to question, until it unraveled in front of them. And when the truth came out, she didn't just fall from grace, she begged my husband, the man she once told me wasn't my league, to make it all go away. But what happens to a family when shame is staged and justice is silent but seen? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have done what I did? I arrived alone. Carnegie Mansion stood as proud as ever under the early spring sky. Classic, aloof, dressed in white light and old money. The doorman gave me a half smile as I passed. I clutched my evening bag tight, felt the chill graze my bare shoulders despite the long sleeves of the cream silk gown I'd chosen. The kind that whispers quiet power, not screams for attention. I knew I'd made the right choice when I stepped through the grand foyer and saw her, Callista. She was magnetic as ever, red satin dress, dramatic curls, eyes darting like she was scanning for cameras instead of people. My mother and father were already there, glasses raised, floating beside her like ornaments. My heels clicked once, twice, on the marble, and then I paused. Mom glanced my way, a flicker of recognition, a millisecond of possibility. But then she smiled wide. At Callista. "Sweetheart, you look like a movie star tonight. They're going to think you're the face of this whole event." Callista laughed like it was modesty, not confirmation. Dad leaned in for a kiss on her cheek. Mom linked arms with her. Just like that, the tableau was complete. A picture-perfect family moment. Except for me. 10 feet away, not a part of the frame. I pressed my lips together and stared at my phone screen, pretending to read a non-existent message. I wasn't surprised, I thought. But that didn't stop the sting. A daughter's place. Sometimes it's not even in the family photo, especially when she refuses to play the part written for her. At the check-in table, I gave my name. Dr. Aurelia Bennett, I said, softly but clearly. The woman behind the table nodded, rifled through the boxes, and handed me my name badge. Dr. A. Bennett, board chair. My work, my title. 10 years of research, meetings, policy revisions, and endless nights compiling the foundation's bylaws. I slipped the badge into my clutch. I didn't want it to snag the silk. I made my way toward the main hall, where the lighting had been softened to a honeyed glow. My heels found the rhythm of the polished floors, and I took in the muted hum of champagne flutes, polite laughter, and curated compliments. That's when Callista found me. She slid up beside me like she'd been waiting. "Hey, sis," she said, voice syrupy sweet, arms open for a hug. I hesitated, then leaned in. She squeezed tightly. Too tightly. "Good to see you here," she whispered into my ear. "You'll love the step and repeat wall. They're using the red backdrop. You know, the one that makes pale skin look washed out?" I smiled coolly. Then she was gone. 10 minutes later, applause erupted across the ballroom. I turned to look. The step and repeat was lit up, and standing under the spotlight, soaking it all in, was Callista, wearing my badge. Dr. A. Bennett, board chair. The MC's voice rang out. "And here's one of our shining supporters and leaders, Callista Bennett. Ladies and gentlemen." Cameras flashed like summer lightning. Reporters called her name. She posed, she laughed, she waved. I stood at the edge of the bar, holding a flute of sparkling water I hadn't tasted. It wasn't theft, it was choreography. One hug, one swipe, one flash. A decade of my work vanished behind someone else's lashes and lipstick. I thought of saying something, but then I remembered something even more important. Saying it doesn't always make people hear you. So I watched and waited. The crowd parted around her like she was royalty, and in that moment, she was. No one questioned it, not a single person. I took a breath, steadying myself. Later that evening, as I moved toward the ballroom entrance, I caught a fragment of a conversation. My mother's voice, soft and pointed. She was always the star. Even Malcolm saw it first. My steps faltered. Not because it hurt. I had grown used to that. But because even after all these years, she still believed it. I didn't stop walking when I heard her say it. I didn't look back. I didn't give her the satisfaction. But I felt it, like a pin pressed to the center of my spine. Not sharp enough to wound, but deep enough to remind me I'd never quite been enough for her. Not bright enough, not loud enough, not Callista. Inside the ballroom, the air had thickened with floral perfume and the rising pitch of clinking glassware. Guests shuffled between stations. Cheese towers, dessert platters, signature cocktails lined up in rows of sparkling temptation. The lighting was lower now, amber and soft, like it was trying to convince us the night still had warmth left to offer. I hovered near the dessert table, more for the illusion of purpose than any desire to indulge. I wasn't hungry. I was watching, strategically, subtly, learning who was watching who. That's when I heard her. "You went with the sapphire, huh?" Callista's voice, smooth and intentional, floated past my ear before she did. She stopped just beside me, not facing me, but speaking loudly enough for nearby guests to catch every word. "Bold choice," she added, dipping her fork into a raspberry tart. "Thought you hated drawing attention. Or is it different now that you married into a bank account?" The woman next to her stifled a laugh behind a flute of Prosecco. Another one raised an eyebrow, but didn't look surprised. I turned my head slowly, meeting her gaze head-on. She looked pleased with herself, like a cat who'd pawed the goldfish bowl just enough to make it ripple. "That's the problem with you, Cal," I said, letting the words rest, low and steady. "You think visibility is the same as power." She didn't reply, but the smile that once curled across her lips fell, just slightly. Enough for me to notice. Enough for the woman behind her to look away, unsure whose side she wanted to be seen on. I walked off before she could reclaim the moment. Half an hour later, I found myself passing the reception desk again, on my way toward the south corridor. I was hoping to step outside, breathe something that didn't taste like money or vanity. But then I heard my mother's voice. Low, intimate, like she thought the hallway would shield her. "She always struggles with nights like this," she said to a woman I recognized but couldn't quite place. Tall, elegant, name on every society page. Fiona, I realized. Fiona Marks, the columnist whose op-eds could kill or crown a career. "Too many people, too much elegance," Mom went on. "Callista thrives in this world. Aurelia just tries to survive it." Fiona hesitated. "But she's the co-founder of the STEM initiative, isn't she?" My mother smiled faintly. That polished, practiced expression that always said too much without sounding like anything at all. "Yes," she said. "But sometimes it's better to let the spotlight rest on the one who knows how to hold it." That did it. It wasn't the words. It was the certainty in her voice, the way she spoke like it was fact, not opinion. Like this was the family memo I'd just never received. I stepped back, letting a few guests pass between us, and pulled out my phone. Not to check anything, but to center myself. They'd written me out of the narrative without even blinking. Not out of malice, not even jealousy, out of preference. That was worse. I returned to the ballroom with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in a long time. Not the quiet of someone defeated, but the clarity of someone done waiting for rescue. Malcolm had asked me once why I rarely spoke up when my sister overstepped. I'd said, "Because it doesn't matter to them." I was wrong. It hadn't mattered because I hadn't made it matter. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room like silk dropped from the rafters. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses paused mid-air. The MC stepped onto the stage, beaming like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. "And to help introduce tonight's keynote speaker," he announced, "please welcome the Bennett family's shining star, Callista Bennett." The spotlight clicked on. She stepped out, smiling like she owned the air we all breathed. And maybe she did, but not for much longer. I stepped outside the ballroom, into a quieter corridor that curved toward a balcony no one used unless they needed air or escape. The light changed out here. Less gold, more slate, cooler on the skin, easier on the nerves. The air was different too. It didn't carry perfume or laughter, just the faint scent of rain still clinging to the stone. I gripped the railing, fingers resting on cold metal. I couldn't see Callista from here, but I could hear the echo of her voice inside. The crowd was still reacting to her, eating out of her palm like trained animals. They always did. It was strange what that moment dredged up. Not anger, not even jealousy. Memory. A summer afternoon. I was 16. Our living room was buzzing with women. Mom's garden club, bridge friends, someone from her book circle. Callista had just been accepted to Columbia. They were celebrating her before she even finished high school. I walked in holding a folder. I'd gotten an early internship at the city library. Nothing glamorous, but it meant something to me. I opened my mouth to share. Then I heard my mother. "Honestly," she said, wine glass in hand, "we didn't plan for another after Callista. But what do? You adjust. She's a sweet girl, but not the same cloth." The room chuckled politely. Not maliciously, just in agreement. I didn't drop the folder. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked back down the hall and shut my bedroom door. It's funny how you forget what day of the week it was, but never the exact words. Back then, I told myself it didn't matter, that I wasn't supposed to be heard in every room, that doing the work quietly had its own dignity. But tonight, hearing Callista introduced with my title, while I stood with my name stripped from the program, it wasn't just history repeating. It was proof that they had never stopped choosing her. I looked out over the garden, the lights from the ballroom flickering on the stone below. I'd helped fund the restoration of those steps, wrote the grant myself, but my name was nowhere near the plaque. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. What I felt was colder, older, the kind of pain that wasn't fresh, but foundational. Behind me, the doors creaked slightly. I turned, expecting a waiter, but it was one of the younger foundation assistants. Chloe, I think her name was. She was maybe 24, trying to play it cool in borrowed heels. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I just wanted to say," she whispered, "you're the reason I donated, not her. People notice the real work, even if your family doesn't." My mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Not because I was shocked, because I believed her. I stepped back into the ballroom just in time for the lights to rise again. Dinner had been served, drinks refreshed, and laughter renewed like someone had hit the reset button. I returned to my table, quietly, as always, while Callista's voice echoed from the stage behind me. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I could map the rhythm of her tone without turning around. Bright, falsely modest, deliberately disarming. Every time she paused for a laugh or looked coyly at the camera, I could tell. She wasn't just performing for the audience. She was rewriting the entire narrative. Then the lights dimmed again, and the large screen behind the stage flickered to life. A montage began. Footage of community STEM camps, young girls coding, building solar-powered prototypes. Voices layered softly beneath it, talking about progress and purpose. I knew those faces. I remembered every girl, every weekend I gave up, every grant I'd fought to get funded. This was my work, my hands, my team, my fight. But I wasn't in the video. Then, as the last voice faded out, a final image filled the screen. Callista, crouched beside a group of smiling girls, one hand on a robot, the other holding a child's shoulder like she'd coached them through rocket science herself. And beneath it, the words, "Brought to life by Callista Bennett, advocate, innovator, visionary." Applause exploded. I didn't stand. I didn't clap. I didn't blink. The MC's voice rang out with confidence. What a radiant symbol of how grace and beauty can also mean bold leadership. I placed my fork down precisely with both hands. My water glass stayed full. My mouth stayed closed. In that moment, I didn't want to be seen. I wanted the lie to stop breathing. I took a breath, steadying my heart against the rising pulse in my neck. Across the room, at the VIP table, I spotted Callista holding court. She laughed in a way that only people who've never worked hard for anything can laugh, loose and loud, like nothing could touch her. Then, casually, she reached for her phone and held it up for her table to see. "It's a throwback," she said, grinning. "Wait for it." A short clip played, projected directly from her screen. It was grainy, jerky, the kind of footage someone took in high school when they were trying to be clever. I was in it, 16, mid-argument with a teacher over a literature assignment I'd challenged. My voice was sharp, my body language defiant. I looked fierce, but out of context, I looked unhinged. The caption scrawled across the bottom of the video. She always had a strong tone. Laughter floated over the table like cheap perfume. One woman, someone from a media outlet, glanced at me, then quickly away, embarrassed for both of us. Callista caught my eye and raised her glass slightly, toasting me with a wink. My fingers curled under the table. I didn't clench them, I didn't move, but something in me clicked. Some people use knives, others use a lens. The damage feels the same. I rose from my chair, calm and measured, and stepped out of the dining area. As I walked, I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. My fingers moved with deliberate grace, opening a message thread I hadn't touched in months. I typed one line. "How quickly can you retrieve copyright proof for unpublished footage?" Then I hit send. I didn't look back. By the time I reached the rooftop lounge, the cold had settled just enough to feel it in my collarbones. Not unpleasant, just bracing. The sky above Manhattan had turned the kind of blue that happens right before the night finally gives up and becomes black. Below, the din of the ballroom felt distant, detached, like the noise belonged to someone else's life. Here, people weren't dancing, they were dealing, power and cocktail dresses, secrets exchanged in half-whispers over stemless wine glasses. This was where image became legacy, and reputation wasn't earned. It was traded. I found a quiet corner near a heating lamp and leaned against the marble railing. Before I could exhale, a woman I didn't recognize approached. Small frame, tablet in one hand, press badge on the other. "Dr. Bennett?" she asked, her tone clipped but not unkind. I nodded. She leaned in slightly. "I was hoping to confirm something, off record of course," which meant very much on the record. "Callista mentioned," she continued, "that you had a medical procedure in your 20s, something to do with pregnancy complications." She said it lightly, like we were discussing a canceled hair appointment, like it was hers to know, hers to question, hers to define. And in that moment, it became clear. Callista wasn't just rewriting the past anymore. She was weaponizing it. I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled out my clutch, unclasped it carefully, and retrieved a folded sheet of thick paper. The notary seal still shimmered faintly under the rooftop light. I handed it to the reporter. "It's confirmation of an egg donation I made when I was 26, I said, calm. "A friend needed help after chemo. There was no pregnancy, no trap, just science and compassion." She blinked. "I don't care if you use it," I added. "Or if you don't, I didn't do it for press, and I won't apologize for my body." She looked at the document, then back at me. Her voice softened. "Thank you for your time." I gave a small nod, then turned before she could find a way to make the moment hers. Inside, the mood had shifted slightly. The music remained light, but there was a tremor under it now, a buzz that hadn't been there before. Something had been said, or maybe just something had been seen. Callista was holding court again, laughing a little too hard, her group a little too rehearsed. I knew the signs. She was overperforming. When Callista turned into a show, it meant she was deflecting. I made my way toward the far end of the lounge, where a few high-top tables gave a view of the skyline. Before I reached it, I heard her voice again, louder this time, for effect. "Aurelia always found her purpose a bit late in life," she said, swirling her wine. "But hey, marrying Malcolm? That's a strategy, and clearly, it's paying off. The laughter was immediate. But one woman didn't laugh. She spotted me first, standing in the fringe of the circle, coat draped over one shoulder, glass untouched in my hand. Her smile faltered. Then Callista saw me. Our eyes met. I stepped into the center without hesitation. "You're right," I said clearly. "I did choose stability, over spotlight, over performative drama. Malcolm didn't marry me for the headlines. He married me for the quiet rooms, the work, the things no one claps for." I let the silence hold for a beat. "He married me," I said, "for substance, which, as you can see tonight, is in short supply." No one moved. Then, somewhere near the bar, a glass clinked against another. Soft. Intentional. A few heads nodded. A quiet ripple moved through the group. Not thunderous, but enough to shift the air. Callista's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't wait for her to recover. I walked past her, measured steps, no urgency, and let my fingers brush against the silver plaque mounted near the terrace exit. My name, engraved in clean serif font, Dr. Aurelia Bennett, endowment chair. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "They never needed to see me to know who built this." I moved back inside slowly, letting the door close behind me with a soft click. The hallway leading to the ballroom had thinned, waitstaff clearing empty glasses, couples pausing to check lipstick or loosen tight ties. I kept my pace even, nodding politely when necessary, but not stopping. As I entered the main space, the vibe had shifted. Gone was the earlier glow of admiration. Now it was a hum of curiosity, eyes darting, lips murmuring, phones up. The press had crept in closer. Lights weren't as soft anymore. I could feel the heat of attention without anyone calling my name. I walked past the edge of the lounge and paused when I heard her voice. Too familiar, too casual. "She's come far," Callista said to a man holding a camera rig, her tone falsely tender. "A few years ago, we weren't even sure she'd make it through recovery. But healing stories are powerful, right?" The man, young, sharp, a blogger with influence, nodded like he'd been handed gold. My body didn't move, but inside, something snapped like overstretched wire. Recovery? There had never been rehab. No therapy stint, no public breakdown. I'd had burnout once, yes, but it hadn't been a secret, and it hadn't required reinvention. What Callista had done in 10 words was worse than gossip. It was calculated storytelling. It was a smear wearing pearls. Then, like she'd sensed me, she turned. Our eyes met. And she smiled. Not the smile of a sister. The smile of a predator who just challenged you to blink first. I didn't. I stepped back quietly, took out my phone, and typed one line to Malcolm. "Prep legal for defamation exposure if this goes public. But don't act yet." Because it wasn't about my past anymore. It was about who got to write it. I headed toward the media alcove to retrieve a charger when I heard my name again, this time from a foundation assistant. "Dr. Bennett, there's someone at the investor table asking for you." I made my way there without hesitation. And then I saw him, Ryan Keel, of all people, all. He stood just as I arrived, like he'd been expecting this scene. His hair was shorter now, more controlled. But the grin? The grin hadn't aged a day. "Still hate Cabernet," he said, grinning. "I remember you tried it once. Threw up in my sink." Callista laughed from 3 seats down. Too loud, too fake. A man in a navy suit chuckled softly, unsure of what was happening. I nodded once. "Nice of you to fly in just to remind me of your plumbing," I said, letting my tone stay even. Ryan blinked. Then I turned to the others. "Let me know if he pitches crypto. He's due for a pivot." Laughter broke through the tension, not wild, but clear enough to separate us. A woman at the end of the table smiled behind her glass. Another looked away, embarrassed for him. Callista stiffened. I didn't bother staying. I turned and left, the sound of my heels muted by the carpet, but not by what I left behind. Halfway down the hallway, I paused at the edge of the catering corridor and checked my phone. A new message. Unknown number. There's a video Callista doesn't want anyone to see. I have it. Meet me near the valet exit, midnight. I stared at the screen, then slipped the phone into my pocket and kept walking. It wasn't fear I felt. It was momentum. I kept moving, back through the glowing corridors of the mansion. It was almost midnight, but the night refused to wind down. The energy had shifted. Less celebration, more calculation. It was the hour when reputations linger longer than the drinks, and the wrong whisper could last longer than the party. The ballroom had thinned just enough to make space between people, but not enough to escape the ever-hovering cameras. I passed a mirrored column and caught my reflection. Still composed. Still in control. But I could feel the sharpness in my steps now, like something had hardened inside me. Like I had finally accepted that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern, and it needed to end. Near the networking lounge, I spotted Callista with her phone out. That was never good news. She had it angled perfectly, selfie mode, catching the soft backdrop of the chandelier glow and curated laughter. I recognized the tone of her voice even before I heard the words. "Hey guys," she purred into the stream. "Just thought I'd give you a peek at the magic tonight. Such a beautiful event. Oh, look!" She panned her phone slightly to where I was walking past in the background. Some people show up to support, some just linger. But hey, let's give the quiet achievers a moment too. I didn't stop, but the damage was already live. I caught two guests pausing mid-conversation, eyes flitting between the screen and me. A reporter nearby raised his phone like he'd found gold. A notification pinged from the corner of someone else's feed. Is that the sister who married the billionaire? She looks uncomfortable. No, I didn't look uncomfortable. I looked done. I turned slightly and met the gaze of the camera, just for a second. Long enough to let her know I saw what she was doing, and I wasn't blinking anymore. She thought her audience was an army, but even mobs can be silenced when the truth is loud enough. I continued toward the bar, passing through clusters of small conversations, laughter that tasted like champagne and insincerity. Then, another flash of her voice behind me, louder this time, coming from one of her friends. "Careful," the woman said with a drunken chuckle. "She's going to ask us to rate her tray-carrying form next." Laughter erupted. Too loud, too rehearsed. Callista chimed in, her voice syrupy and sharp. "No, she'll probably file a patent for it." That's when a group of them, maybe 5 or 6, started mock-walking in a circle. Arms tucked in, eyes cast down, mimicking the way I moved through events with quiet efficiency. The lounge was suddenly too quiet and too loud at once. Then, out of nowhere, a teenage girl stepped forward. "Enough," she said, clear and unwavering. The room froze. "You're not edgy, you're mean." Callista's smile dropped for half a second. The girl stepped back, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. I looked at the girl. No older than 16, probably a donor's daughter in a borrowed dress and borrowed confidence. But in that moment, she was braver than anyone in that room had been all night. I nodded once to her. Not for her sake, for mine. Because the first crack never starts with a blow. It starts with someone else seeing it too. Callista recovered fast, of course. Laughed like it was all a joke that got away from them. But her eyes met mine, and I saw it. Not guilt, not shame, fear. I turned on my heel, leaving her in that silence, and headed toward the exit. The corridor smelled of lilies and waxed floors. Everything too polished, too curated. A place built to cover things, not confront them. At the door, a valet in a dark jacket stepped toward me quietly. He didn't speak. He simply extended his hand with a small envelope. Inside, a flash drive. No note. Just 3 words handwritten across the inner flap. Watch before dawn. Then decide what to burn. I didn't stop moving, not until I reached a quiet corner near the back entrance where no one lingered anymore. I slipped the flash drive into my phone using the tiny adapter I always kept in my clutch. Old habit from managing foundation press decks, not revenge fantasies. But life had a way of redefining usefulness. The file loaded quickly. No title screen, no dramatic music, just raw footage. A close-up shot, from above. Callista, in her silver gown. Behind me. She reached out, calmly, deliberately, and found the edge of my dress, right where the fabric was double-stitched to hold weight. She didn't yank yet, just pinched it, curled it between her fingers, then pulled, sharply. The video froze at that exact moment. The frame captured my shock. Her smirk. I didn't flinch, didn't press rewind. I just let it sit there in my palm like a truth too long silenced. It wasn't an accident. It was theater. I glanced up. The final toasts were beginning. The crowd had reassembled. Champagne flutes glittered under the chandeliers. Callista stood near the dance floor, surrounded again. They always surrounded her. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked across the room, my heels striking the marble harder than before. Intentional. I passed the stage tech near the AV booth and handed him my phone. "Project this," I said. "No volume needed." He blinked but didn't ask questions. Years in event work teaches obedience under pressure. The lights dimmed as another speech wrapped up. A guest raised a glass. Someone laughed too loud, and then the screen behind the stage lit up. The video played, no title, no introduction, just her, pulling my dress. The room went dead silent, gasps, then silence again. Callista stepped forward as if to protest, but mid-step, the seam of my gown tore slightly at the side. Not from the video, from her original tug. Someone screamed. Not in fear, but recognition. She did that on purpose. Flashbulbs erupted like a storm. One person dropped their glass. Another whispered something too fast to catch. But I stood still, center stage now. No microphone, no applause. Just truth. I walked up slowly, took the auxiliary cord from the AV assistant, and disconnected my phone. The screen went black. My voice didn't rise. I didn't perform. I didn't lecture. I just said, "This is what envy looks like when it runs out of lies." No one clapped. They didn't need to. Because when a room sees the thing you've been saying all along, silence is louder than standing ovations. Callista stood frozen, her hand still half raised, like she didn't know whether to explain or escape. No one moved toward her. She turned slowly and looked at me, but I didn't meet her eyes this time. I wasn't here to convince her of anything anymore. Malcolm stepped forward from the back. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. He looked at the crowd. "I'll handle the legal side," he said, voice clear, measured. "But tonight, you all witnessed the truth." And just like that, the air in the room changed. Not because of him, but because of what had finally been seen. I returned just before sunrise. The mansion no longer shimmered. It sat heavy in the morning haze, like a house that had finally confessed to its own secrets. The courtyard was empty, save for two valets nursing coffee from paper cups, their jackets wrinkled and their eyes tracking no one in particular. Inside, the lounge had been stripped of its sparkle. Chairs stacked, centerpieces boxed, the scent of leftover roses clinging to everything like memory. I wasn't here to linger. I just needed my folder, the one I'd left at the foundation booth near the registration table. But as I crossed the now bare ballroom, I noticed the staff glancing up at me, their conversations stalling mid-sentence. Not rudely, not even curiously, just differently. The hush wasn't cold. It wasn't polite either. It was a kind of recognition I hadn't earned from them before. One young man muttered, just loud enough for me to catch, "People finally know who the real star was." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I wasn't looking for applause anymore. I was looking for peace. Near the side doors, a tech assistant was packing equipment into a hard case. He looked up, then hesitated. "Dr. Bennett?" I nodded. He pulled something from his pocket, a flash drive with a bright red label. "There's something you should hear," he said. "From earlier. It was recorded accidentally. Lapel mic. We always keep the raw feeds for syncing. I took it gently. He added, already online. I found a chair near the corner, popped the drive into my phone, and slid on my headphones. The audio clicked on, muffled movement, background noise, and then her. Callista. No, pull harder near the waist seam, she said, laughing under her breath. If it tears there, she'll think it's her own weight. Trust me, the worse she looks, the better I shine. My breath didn't hitch. My hands didn't tremble. What I felt was beyond betrayal. It was clarity. The hashtag had already begun trending. Shakir ripped by blood. I stared at the words on screen, the comment threads unraveling beneath them. Some were cruel. Most were stunned. But one simply read, she planned it. She planned it all. And for once, the world believed them. Not me. Her. A soft knock interrupted the storm in my earbuds. One of the event volunteers stood there, holding a slim envelope with my name written in pen. I opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter on thick cream paper. I laughed when she mocked you. I didn't stop her. But you stood taller than all of us. I'm sorry. You taught me something we weren't brave enough to learn. No name. Just Marlene, table 6. I folded it carefully and placed it inside the flap of my binder. Not for revenge, not for memory. Just to know that someone, somewhere, had the courage to own their silence. It didn't undo what happened, but it acknowledged the wound. And that's where real healing always begins. I stood, gathered the last of my things, and took one long look around the ballroom. The same chandeliers. The same velvet ropes. But everything felt different now. Not because they changed. Because I had. As I stepped out into the early light, my phone vibrated. A new message from Malcolm. Board is meeting at 10. Your name is on every agenda. I smiled, not because it was unexpected, but because it was earned. The elevator opened directly into the boardroom on the 28th floor. Glass walls, chrome finishes, polished walnut table, all designed to intimidate without saying a word. But I wasn't here to be impressed. I was here to be clear. Malcolm was already seated at the head, hands clasped, eyes unreadable. The rest of the room filled quickly. Legal counsel to the left, media advisors to the right. A few family stakeholders looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I walked in without waiting for an introduction. No one stood, but no one spoke either. The VP of Legal tapped a folder against the table twice and began. Due to recent evidence of defamation, reputational harm, and intentional sabotage during a flagship philanthropic event under our brand, this meeting has been convened for emergency decisions regarding personnel and public positioning. She clicked a remote, and two screens behind her came to life. One showed the dress-ripping footage. The other, the audio recording of Callista's premeditated instructions. No, pull harder near the waist seam. The room didn't gasp this time. They already knew. Callista appeared on the large center monitor. Video linked in from wherever she had chosen to hole up. Her hair was pulled back, lips bare of gloss, eyes calculating. I assume I'm not allowed to speak? She said with a forced laugh. Malcolm didn't even look at her. He addressed the room. She's not here to defend herself, he said. She's here to hear the consequences. He gestured toward me without turning. This company was built on integrity, and last night my wife restored it. I didn't blink. I didn't need to. He continued. The public trusts what we build, what we support, who we stand behind, and we stand behind her. Silence. The kind that doesn't ask for applause, just agreement. The general counsel slid a document toward me. The signature page. Malcolm had already signed. 2 trustees had signed. 1 blank remained. Effective immediately, he said. Callista Bennett is removed from all legacy-facing initiatives, PR duties, and succession planning related to the Bennett Family Trust. Oversight of all philanthropic divisions will fall solely under Dr. Aurelia Bennett. A click echoed as I signed. 1 pen stroke, 1 line, 1 door closed. Callista's voice buzzed through the speakers, thin and small now. "You're ruining me for one bad night," I finally spoke. "You ruined you," I said, voice steady. "I just made sure people saw it." The video feed cut out. No one tried to bring it back. The meeting moved on: action items, media strategies, succession updates. It was oddly procedural, almost clinical. And yet, I felt every second settle into place, like bricks forming something stronger. When it adjourned, the room stood slowly, gathering phones, folders, reputations. As I moved toward the exit, one of the senior board members, Reed Hammond, a man who hadn't said 10 words to me in 5 years, stepped closer. "There's a keynote opening at Aspen," he said quietly. "Policy forum. They're asking for someone unshakable." I raised an eyebrow. "And you said?" He smiled faintly. "Told them I'd ask the one woman who knows how to steady a storm without raising her voice." I nodded once, polite. Nothing smug, just calm. "Let them send details," I said. "And next time, don't wait so long to ask." 3 days after the boardroom meeting, I returned to something resembling a routine. The media had already shifted its attention to the next scandal. Social feeds that once buzzed with hashtags and outrage now circled back to vacation photos, brunch posts, and political hot takes. The world spun on. But inside my apartment, things moved slower. Intentionally so. My home office in Soho overlooked a quiet street where the honking died down after 4 p.m., and the light filtered through the sheer curtains like it respected boundaries. I sat at my desk, reviewing logistics for the foundation tour, sipping tea that had gone lukewarm hours ago. That's when the knock came. 3 soft taps. Not urgent, not rehearsed. I opened the door, and there she was. Callista. No entourage, no gloss. Her hair pulled back in a careless knot, her face bare. Even her clothes, a wrinkled cardigan, jeans that didn't try, spoke louder than her lips did. She didn't wait to be invited in. She walked past me, dropped her handbag on the edge of my reading chair, and stood in the center of the room like she wasn't sure what to hold on to. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said finally, her voice cracking. I've always been the one they noticed." I didn't speak. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for what I said, for what I let them say, for what I made them believe." She sat down, not because I offered, but because her legs gave in. I remained standing. "I believe you," I said quietly, "but it doesn't change what it cost me." Her eyes met mine, glassier than I'd ever seen them. Not angry, not manipulative, just tired. "So what now?" she asked, a note of desperation breaking through. "You just cut me out?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward. "No," I said. "You did that when you tore more than my dress. I'm just not sewing it back together for you." She let out a breath that sounded like surrender. Then, without another word, she picked up her bag, walked to the door, and opened it herself. The hallway light fell across the floor, like a line neither of us was going to cross again. She paused, just long enough for me to see the part of her that wasn't ready to go. Then she stepped over it. The door clicked shut behind her. Soft, final. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I sat down at my desk, picked up a pen, and finished reviewing the travel schedule. There, on top of the folder, was a note from Malcolm. "The Foundation launch tour is yours to lead. First stop, D.C. You were always the one they'd follow." The ballroom in D.C. was nothing like Carnegie Mansion, but it didn't need to be. It didn't shimmer with generational wealth or whisper history through marble columns. It was newer, sleek, modern, unapologetically practical. It was built for ideas, not illusions. And tonight, it was mine. 2 weeks had passed since the board meeting. The media storm had mostly quieted. Callista's name was still circulating in think pieces and industry newsletters, usually as a cautionary tale. But I'd stopped reading them. There was no satisfaction in watching someone fall apart. What mattered now was what came next. My steps echoed softly against the polished floor as I moved toward the stage, heart steady beneath the white gown I'd chosen carefully, intentionally, the same one she tore, not replaced, not hidden, repaired. The seam was still there, a faint line running diagonally across the left hip, but now it glimmered faintly with gold stitching. It didn't try to disappear. It leaned into the damage, owned it. A few guests noticed as I walked past. Some whispered. One woman nodded, her eyes wet. Not pity, something else. Recognition, maybe. The lights dimmed, and I stepped onto the stage. My name flashed across the screen behind me. Dr. Aurelia Bennett, founder, Quiet Power STEM Initiative. Applause rose, warm, unforced, real. I approached the mic and adjusted it slightly. Then I looked out at the room. Mostly women, mostly tired. Teachers, policymakers, first-generation students. The kind of crowd that doesn't care what label's on your heels, only what you're standing for. I cleared my throat, spoke slowly. 2 weeks ago, the world saw a video. A dress torn in public. A moment that was never meant to happen, but did. And in that moment, many people focused on the rip. I paused, let the silence settle. But what stayed with me wasn't the tear. It was what came after, the stitch, the choice to mend instead of replace. Because dignity doesn't depend on their silence, it lives in our voice. The screen behind me changed. Side by side, the viral photo from the gala and a new image, the plaque from the foundation wall, my name etched cleanly beneath it. The audience exhaled as one. And then came the clapping. Not polite, not forced. True. Somewhere near the third row, a girl no older than 15 wiped her eyes. I locked eyes with her for half a second, then looked away, so she could hold that moment as hers. Backstage, after the lights cooled and the seats emptied, I found a small envelope tucked under my speech notes. No postage, no return address. Inside was a letterhead from the Aspen Institute, just 2 sentences. You are confirmed to lead our upcoming global policy panel. We need your clarity now more than ever. Beneath it, in blue ink, someone had handwritten, "They were right. You are unshakable." Before I could fold it away, one of the interns ran up, breathless. "Dr. Bennett, do you have a second? There's someone who wants to meet you." I followed her around the corner to the back gallery. A cluster of students was waiting, notebooks clutched, eyes wide. One girl stepped forward. Her voice trembled. "I want to grow up to be the kind of woman who speaks with her eyes first, just like you." I didn't correct her, didn't tell her how often I'd failed at that exact thing. Instead, I touched her shoulder lightly. "Then you already are." As I gathered my coat and stepped into the night, my phone buzzed. A text from Malcolm. "Come home, the world sees you now." But I always did. I stood for a moment under the DC sky, the wind tugging gently at my coat, the seam of my gown brushing against my leg like a quiet reminder. Some things tear, but the right ones, the ones built with purpose, they hold. Hello, my name is Gemma, and my sister once said, "Maybe dying will finally make you interesting." While I was lying alone in the ICU, hooked up to machines I couldn't pronounce, fighting to stay alive. They were in Hawaii that week, celebrating her wedding on my dime, while I couldn't even reach the call button fast enough. What hurts more? That they left me there, or that they were never planning to come back. They said I was unstable. They tried to take my house, my money, even my name. But how do you fight a family that rewrites the story and casts you as the villain? Would you have believed them too? The rain had already darkened the sidewalk outside my apartment by the time I forced myself out of bed that morning. It wasn't just a cold. I knew that much. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, and my chest felt like it was closing in on itself. I remember thinking, irrationally, that I'd left the heater on too long, that maybe the air was stale or too dry. But when I stumbled trying to get to the kitchen for a glass of water, I knew it wasn't the air, it was me. The EMTs told me later I was lucky. Pneumonia had turned septic, and if I had waited even a few more hours, I might not have made it through the night. They said it like I should have felt fortunate, But lying alone in that white, sterile ICU room, wires snaking from my arms, machines beeping out rhythms my body couldn't keep on its own. I didn't feel lucky. I felt abandoned. There was a pattern to it, a familiar rhythm of being overlooked, talked over, brushed aside like dust on a windowsill. Callista, my sister, had always been the golden one. Tall, camera-ready, with that air of being born into the right lighting. She was the family's pride, their polished picture frame, and I was the one they described with words like practical or independent, which, let's be honest, is what people say when they don't want to admit you've been doing it all alone. From my hospital bed, I tapped open my phone and called my mother first. No answer. Then my father. Voicemail. I hesitated before pressing Callista's name, half knowing what would come. Nothing. Straight to voicemail again. I waited, counting the beeps from the IV machine as the minutes passed. When the message finally came, it was from my mother, sent via text. We're at the airport, already boarding. Callista's wedding's in Maui. We'll check in next week. That was it. No question of how I was. No acknowledgement of the ER. No reassurance that someone would come. Just a text, as cold and flat as the hospital tile beneath my feet. I read it twice, then a third time, in case my fevered brain had misunderstood. But there it was. Plain, intentional, final. I closed my eyes and let the silence answer the questions I hadn't dared ask. The nurses were kind, in that distant way people are when they're used to seeing things fall apart. One of them, a younger woman named Tanya, gently helped adjust the oxygen mask and offered to contact family again. "No one's checked in," she said, trying to make her voice soft but failing. "You sure you don't want us to call someone?" I shook my head. I was sure. By the second day, my fever had broken just enough for me to sit up. Tanya adjusted the bed, handed me my phone, and told me to take it slow. I should have been checking in on labs, my inbox, maybe something comforting, but I went straight to Instagram. Some reflex I couldn't explain. Maybe I was looking for a reason, or an explanation. Instead, I found the real. Callista, standing barefoot on a beach, her wedding dress perfectly windswept, the sunset hitting her just right. A saxophone cover of a Bruno Mars song played over the footage while slow fades and cinematic zooms painted her as the picture of grace. Her caption read, "Living my best life with my favorite people." There was no mention of me. No subtle nod, not even a vague, "wish you were here" to soften the absence. My father commented with heart emojis. My mom had reposted it to her story with, "So proud of our girl," written across it. I scrolled through more images. Callista clinking glasses with her groom, Callista dancing barefoot, Callista laughing with guests. I scrolled until my thumb ached, until my eyes stung, not just from the infection, but from something far deeper. I wasn't jealous. This wasn't about that. I had no dreams of flower arches or matching robes. What I had dreamed of, foolishly it turns out, was that even just once, someone in that family would look up from Callista's spotlight and see me standing in the shadows, coughing my lungs out in an ICU bed. I tried to rationalize it. Told myself maybe they didn't understand how serious it was. Maybe they thought I was exaggerating. I had always been the dramatic one, after all, despite being the one who quietly paid the bills, booked the flights, covered the insurance shortfalls they never mentioned publicly. But my medical chart said it clearly: ICU, high risk, unstable vitals. And Tanya, when she came in to check my vitals that evening, looked at me with something close to pity. I asked carefully, "Any messages?" She shook her head. "No one's checked in yet." I nodded, trying to breathe evenly as the machines hummed beside me. It was almost evening. The light outside my window had shifted from gray to a deeper, bruised hue. Rain tapped gently against the glass. Tanya adjusted the blanket around my legs and offered me a small smile before leaving. The silence was no longer new, but that night it grew teeth. I was about to shut my eyes when the screen flickered with another notification. I didn't need to look. I knew it was her. Callista had posted again. Another reel. My perfect wedding in paradise. 3 days after Callista's wedding reel flickered across my screen, the room had grown quieter than I thought possible. There were no flowers, no calls, not a single missed message from anyone with my last name. Nurses rotated shifts, machines beeped like lullabies on repeat. I learned to tell time by the shadow patterns crawling across the wall and by the rhythm of pill cups being swapped out. I'd stopped checking my phone for anything other than updates from the hospital portal, labs, vitals, notes from doctors I never met face to face. And then, the message came. It wasn't a private message. No. That would have required intention. It came in the family group chat. My mom, dad, Callista, and me. A thread we used mostly for things like who was bringing what to Thanksgiving or to share photos from Callista's latest wellness retreat. The same chat where I'd texted just an hour earlier while still tethered to an IV. I'm still in ICU. If anything happens, I love you all. I meant it, not in a dramatic way, not as a guilt trip, just truth. A quiet offering to people who had always made it clear I was more useful than lovable. A message you send when you don't know if the next breath might be the one your lungs reject. Callista responded first. Maybe dying will finally make you interesting. Smiley face emoji, yellow, cheeky, as if we were talking about a vacation or a movie I needed to see. Then came my mother's reply. A thumbs up reaction. That was it, not even words, just a floating hand giving approval. I stared at the screen, waiting for something else. A follow-up, a correction. Anything to suggest this was a cruel autocorrect mistake. But nothing else came. I read it again, then again, 5 times in total. My brain refused to accept that what I was reading was what they meant. It had to be something else. Surely Callista didn't mean that the only way I'd ever matter to her was through my absence, through death. And my mom, her reaction, had to be an accident. She was never good with technology. Maybe she meant to send a heart. Maybe she didn't see the context. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't the first time I'd been served a low blow masked in charm. I remembered a summer years ago. Callista had been invited to speak at a health expo, and I'd flown down on my own dime to help her coordinate behind the scenes. I wasn't mentioned once on stage, not in thank yous, not in photos. When I brought it up later, lightly, she laughed. She's only smart because she has nothing else, Callista had said, half grinning over her glass of wine. Come on, Gemma, that's just how you are. Useful. My mother, sipping her Pinot next to her, added, She's just teasing. You know how she is. Yeah, I did. I just didn't want to believe it then. But now, lying alone in that sterile room, wrapped in hospital-grade blankets and reality, I saw it all for what it was, clear as the IV fluid dripping beside me. I wasn't part of their picture. I was the wallet, the fixer, the one who sent money when Callista's business went through a low month, who paid off Dad's car loan, who covered Mom's medical emergency that turned out to be elective surgery. My lungs burned with every breath, but this pain, this realization, it was colder. I didn't cry. I took a screenshot, tapped the lock button twice, saved it in a folder I'd never had to make before. Evidence. Then I opened the Notes app. My hands trembled, but not from the infection. I started a list. The title. What I paid for. Line by line I typed. Mom. Breast augmentation. $15,000. Dad. 2017. Chevy Equinox payoff. $8,200. Callista. Rent. Social media ad campaign. Travel expenses for wellness summit. $22,400. Groceries. Utilities. Emergency plane tickets I never used. The numbers blurred together. But the total? Heavy. A weight I'd been dragging for years and calling love. That night, no one called. The nurses dimmed the lights, offered me warm tea. One asked if there was anyone she could notify. I shook my head. There's no one. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I just didn't want anyone showing up out of guilt or obligation. I didn't want more fake smiles or shallow hugs. Before falling asleep, I messaged Luna, my financial advisor. We'd worked together for years. She knew my voice, even in a single sentence. When I'm stable, I want to revise everything. She responded within minutes. Absolutely. I'm here. We'll take it step by step. Rest first. The monitor beeped steadily beside me. I watched the numbers change, watched them level out, drop, then rise again. But none of it felt as loud as the silence in my chest. The kind of silence that only comes when the truth finally settles in. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was aware. Sharply so. For years, I had rationalized, minimized, compartmentalized. But now I saw every scar they left, every time I'd swallowed my pride and called it being the bigger person. It wasn't humility, it was survival, a learned habit of shrinking just enough to keep the peace. But peace isn't silence, and silence wasn't safety. Not for me. 3 days passed. No visits, no flowers, no apologies. But in that time, between blood draws and breath work, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I planned. By the morning of the 4th day, my breathing had steadied, but the weight in my chest had not. The inflammation in my lungs was receding, yet something far more corrosive had taken its place. Betrayal sat in my throat like thick syrup. I didn't need more time to think. I needed clarity. And clarity, as it turned out, came with paperwork. A nurse named Danny brought in the initial invoice, tucked in a manila folder. She placed it gently on the tray table beside me, as if it were something fragile, like glass. I remember thanking her, my voice still scratchy from the oxygen tubes. She gave me a quick smile and said, "No rush. You're not going anywhere yet." The bill was dense, pages and pages of codes and medications and fees. But what caught my eye wasn't the total. It was the small line item that read, "Card on file, Visa ending in 4882. That wasn't my primary card. In fact, that wasn't even a card I'd used personally in over 2 years. It was an old emergency backup I kept active strictly for family use, shared with Callista and my mother for just-in-case situations. I remembered clearly disabling auto payments and turning off international transactions last fall, after another wellness retreat Callista had conveniently forgotten to reimburse me for. I pulled my phone off the charger slowly, the IV tugging slightly at my wrist. Once I was logged into the banking app, my jaw tensed. That card had been used 5 times during the past 3 days, while I was unconscious and hooked to a machine, fighting for air. First charge, $3,800 at a designer boutique in Beverly Hills. The timestamp matched the morning before Callista's wedding. Second, $900 at a spa resort on the Big Island, massage, facial, couples aromatherapy. Third, $1,500 to a content creation service that specialized in influencer travel packages, pre-scripted captions, retouched footage, social boost bundles. I recognized the name instantly. It had been tagged in Callista's perfect wedding post. The final 2 charges were smaller, but no less galling. A luxury nail salon in Honolulu and a private driver's retainer. They weren't just using me. They were using me to fund a fantasy. My sister, dancing barefoot in a designer dress I unwittingly paid for, had done so while I lay tethered to machines that had no idea they were draining the same account. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just sat there, silent, focused, controlled. There was a kind of burn that didn't show up on X-rays. The kind that didn't raise your temperature but still turned everything inside you to ash. As I sat upright in the hospital bed, a message popped up on my screen. It was from a colleague, Tara, someone I'd mentored years ago. "Hey, just checking in. Your text last week felt off. Thought it was weird you said not to visit or contact anyone." My blood went cold. I scrolled up. Tara was right. There it was, texts sent from my number, all with my tone, my abbreviations, my signature lack of emojis, casual but distant, telling her I was good, that the fam is here, no worries, and even a thanks, but let's catch up when I'm back. I didn't write those messages. I didn't touch my phone during those days. Half the time, I wasn't even fully conscious. Someone had texted from my number while I was unconscious in ICU. Someone had pretended to be me. I launched the settings menu, scanned through devices connected to my iCloud. The list showed an unfamiliar IP address in California logged into my iMessage account the day after I'd been admitted. It was masked under a familiar device name, Callista's MacBook Pro. I froze, then exhaled slowly. It wasn't even sloppy, it was arrogant. She hadn't tried to hide it. I tapped through my calendar, opening my email app, forwarding everything to a new folder I named Legal. I contacted Jalen, a friend from IT who owed me a favor after I helped him through a nasty bug in our security backend. "Hey," I typed, "need to trace device access and confirm login behavior from my account. Can you help?" Jalen's response was almost immediate. "Of course. Send me the logs. You okay?" I didn't reply to that part. Over the next several hours, between doses of antibiotics and brief naps, we confirmed everything. Callista had accessed my iMessage account remotely, sent texts under my name, and deleted logs that only partially synced to my device. She wanted the world to think I was fine, that I didn't need anyone, that I wasn't alone because I chose to be. She was building her story while I was being written out of mine. And the worst part? It wasn't even about me. It was about her image, her brand. Her narrative of glowing through adversity, of being the sister who tried everything, the daughter who had to carry the weight of the family. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I did what I always do. I documented. I created a new spreadsheet titled, Assets Controlled by Me. The irony made my lips curl into something that wasn't quite a smile. It wasn't just finances anymore. It was social leverage, legal ties, medical decisions. My name was still attached to too many things I no longer had control over. Mortgage cosigner, parents' house, phone plan administrator, family group plan, emergency credit line connected to Mom's and Callista's accounts, utility bills, car insurance, even Callista's gym membership was routed through my business account. For a long time, I thought doing those things meant love, that helping them stay afloat meant they'd never let me drown. But people don't always return what they take. That night, as the lights in the hallway dimmed and the hallway grew quiet, I sat up straighter in my hospital bed and whispered aloud to no one in particular, "You messed with the wrong version of me." The day I was discharged from the hospital, the sky over Portland was unusually bright. The sunlight felt artificial, like a set piece in a play I no longer wanted to perform in. A hospital orderly wheeled me to the pickup area while I held the discharge papers in my lap, carefully folded, though I'd already memorized every word on them. They said I was stable, that I could recover at home, and that follow-up appointments would be arranged. I didn't have anyone waiting outside. No flowers. No, "We're bringing you home, sweetheart." I ordered a rideshare. The driver didn't say much, which I was grateful for. As we pulled up to my apartment building, I told myself I'd focus on resting, healing, rebuilding, but my front door had other plans. There it was, a thick manila envelope sticking out of my mailbox, the kind that made your stomach twist before you even opened it. I took it upstairs, placed it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it while I put groceries away. The basics I'd had delivered the day before: soup, crackers, tea, just enough to survive a week of silence. Eventually, I peeled the envelope open. The first page read, "Notice of Petition for Guardianship." I stopped breathing for a full beat. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a concern. It was a legal petition filed by my mother, Vera Thorne, and co-signed by my sister, Callista Greaves. They were petitioning the court for full legal and financial guardianship over me. They were trying to take everything. The document stated I was mentally compromised, unable to manage financial obligations, and emotionally unstable due to prolonged medical decline. They'd even included a medical opinion, signed by a licensed professional, Dr. Elric Marin. I hadn't seen Dr. Marin in years. He was a longtime friend of my mother's, a semi-retired psychiatrist who lived in Lake Oswego. He wasn't part of the hospital team. He hadn't evaluated me. And yet, his name was there, neatly printed, with a signature below it. I flipped the page again. Subject displays obsession with familial control, shows signs of paranoia regarding financial transactions, and demonstrates delusional interpretation of family dynamics. Delusional, paranoid, obsessed. I felt like I was reading a script they'd written without me, casting me in a role I never auditioned for. I called my lawyer, Tom. He picked up immediately. "You're out," he said before I could speak. "Good, I was just about to call you." I told him about the envelope. He wasn't surprised. "They filed it yesterday," he said. "I got the electronic copy this morning. We'll contest it." "On what grounds?" I asked, my voice flat. "Fraud. And we'll add defamation if that report is what I think it is." He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't coddle. That was why I hired him. "Do you want to come in today?" he asked. "No," I said. "Schedule it. I'll be there tomorrow." After the call, I sent a single message to Luna, my financial advisor. "They're making their move." She replied in under a minute. "They didn't expect you to wake up." No, they didn't. They were building a future where I didn't exist. Just my money. Just my name on the account. My signature on the dotted line. I was supposed to slip away quietly, conveniently, while they narrated their version of loss, grief, sacrifice. Instead, I got up. The next morning, I made my way to Tom's office. Slow steps, still recovering, but each one more grounded than I'd felt in weeks. He met me in the conference room with a pot of coffee and a folder the size of a college thesis. Luna joined via video call. Her screen showed spreadsheets, flagged transactions, and emails with timelines that told a story far more honest than any handwritten affidavit ever could. Callista had started draining my emergency fund before I was admitted. She'd rerouted payments from the family phone plan to a different account, one under her fiancé's name. My mother had scheduled the initial consultation with Dr. Marin days before I collapsed. This wasn't spontaneous. This was a campaign. "We'll need to respond within 10 days, Tom said. "And if you're willing, we can push for a countersuit." "For what?" I asked, even though I knew. "Fraud, misrepresentation, intentional emotional distress." I nodded. "Do it." That evening, just as I was settling in on the couch with my heating pad and herbal tea, there was a knock on the door. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't expecting anyone. The second knock was louder. When I opened it, I was face to face with the two people I least wanted to see. Vera, dressed like she was headed to brunch at the country club, and Callista, wearing oversized sunglasses and a neutral-toned trench coat like she was starring in a lifestyle ad. "Gemma?" my mother said with a tight smile. "We were just in the neighborhood." "Sure you were," I said, leaning against the doorframe. Callista took off her glasses. "We wanted to check on you. You've been through so much." I didn't move. "What do you want?" "To talk," she said, "about how we can fix this. There's no need to make things harder than they need to be." I almost laughed. "You mean harder than filing for guardianship behind my back? Or inventing medical diagnoses through someone who's never stepped foot in my hospital room?" "Gemma," Vera said with that patronizing calm she always used when trying to sound reasonable. "You're still recovering. This isn't personal. We just want to make sure you're protected. It's for your own good." And there it was. Those words again. I stepped forward. "If you say, 'for my own good' one more time, I will call security and have you removed from the building." They didn't move. Callista opened her mouth like she wanted to fight. I saw the flash in her eyes, the same one she used on stage when someone questioned her authenticity, but Vera cut her off. "Well," she said, smoothing her scarf, "then I guess we'll just let the court decide what's best, while you still have a say." I shut the door. Not loudly, not in anger, just decisively. The kind of close that doesn't echo. The kind that settles everything in its place. They thought I was weak, that I'd crumble under pressure, that I'd be too sick or too scared to fight. What they didn't know was I'd already started pulling the strings they thought were theirs. I didn't sleep much after that door closed. The click of the lock echoed in my mind long after they'd walked away. I made tea, sat on the floor with my laptop, and pulled up the wedding expense files. I hadn't looked at them since before the hospital, when I thought I was helping my sister build her dream day, not fund my own erasure. It was around 2 a.m. when the video came. A mutual friend, Olivia, someone who used to work with Callista on a failed skincare brand, messaged me out of nowhere. "Thought you should see this. I figured you weren't there." She included a link, a video posted on a wedding videographer's social channel. I clicked without thinking. The screen faded in on Callista standing at the front of an open-air venue in Maui. Her eyes looked misty, sunset behind her, soft piano music playing. It was professionally lit, color-graded and edited like a short film. Then she spoke. "My little sister couldn't be here today," she said, voice trembling, "but I know she's watching over us in spirit." There was a collective awe from the guests. The camera panned to people dabbing their eyes. Her new husband squeezed her hand. She went on. "Gemma has always been a guiding light in my life. Her quiet strength, her generosity, it's something I carry in my heart every day. I wish she could be here, but I understand, and I want her to know she is loved." The comments section was full of admiration. "So touching. What a strong sister bond. Callista is such a class act." I stared at the screen for what felt like a full hour. I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. That video had over 200,000 views already. She made me a ghost, a tragic, invisible angel to prop up her fairy tale. I hadn't just paid for the wedding, I had paid to be erased from it. I pulled up my records. My company card still showed the deposits to the venue, the floral designer, the DJ, the bakery. I'd arranged every one of those contacts myself. And then I remembered, each contract had listed me as the event planner. Not Callista. Me. I logged into each vendor's portal and started reading. Sure enough, something had changed. On 3 of the contracts, my name had been replaced with Event Coordinator, Ashley Green. I didn't know an Ashley Green. Then I remembered Callista had an assistant with that name. Barely 20, more of an intern than anything. But somehow she was now credited for planning a 6-figure wedding. The next morning, after 2 hours of broken sleep and a coffee that tasted like bitterness more than caffeine, I made the call. She answered on the second ring. "Well, look who finally wants to talk," Callista said, chipper as ever. I didn't waste time. "You know exactly why I'm calling." A pause. "Is this about the tribute? Because I thought it was a nice touch." "You mean the lie?" I snapped. "The performance. You faked a eulogy for your living sister. You weren't there. You knew I couldn't be." Callista sighed, clearly bored now. "Gemma, no one cares who paid for what. People remember who walked down the aisle, who stood at the altar. That's what matters." "Then let them remember that when the truth comes out," I said, voice low. "Because I'm done covering for you. I'm done letting you sell a version of us that doesn't exist." She laughed. "Sweetheart, no one wants receipts. They want stories. That's why I get paid and you don't." I hung up. Then I started documenting. I pulled every invoice, took screenshots of every altered name, compiled the date stamps, created a file labeled Misrepresentation of Ownership, and sent it to Tom. Next, I drafted formal cease and desist letters to each vendor. I wasn't out for them. I knew they'd been misled, but they needed to know they were being used in a broader scheme. I sent the letters directly and blind copied a few trusted media contacts. Then, I pulled the last card. I halted all pending payments. Within 2 days, I got the first call from the floral designer. She was livid. "We never got the balance. Your sister told us you'd already processed it." "Check the account," I said. "Nothing's gone through, and you might want to check who you list as your coordinator. It's not legally accurate." Word spread fast. A DJ posted on Twitter, "Turns out the angelic bride didn't pay the band, thanks to her ghost sister for saving our contracts." Within a week, there were whispers, then louder voices, then a full-on Reddit thread titled, "Is Callista Greaves a Fraud?" filled with screenshots, vendor complaints, and links to her tribute video contrasted with my financial records. I didn't have to post a single word. They did it for me. Every time she tried to spin it, "This is a misunderstanding, my team is handling it," another document surfaced. Another vendor came forward. They had thrown a wedding with my money, my silence, and my absence. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the ghostwriter. I was the editor, and I had just taken the pen back. It was a Sunday afternoon when I made the drive out to my parents' place. There was no real reason to wait any longer, just a pile of unfinished errands I kept postponing. Mostly because I didn't want to see the house again. I didn't want to stand in the same doorway where I used to hand over checks for the mortgage, or park in the same driveway where my name was still attached to the loan. I had two goals: pick up my old tax files from the hall closet and grab the box of kitchen items I left there last fall. Things I hadn't needed in my apartment but never got around to moving. It was sunny but still cold, that odd mix of Oregon weather that felt like the season itself couldn't make up its mind. I pulled up in front of the house, parked, and approached the front door, expecting the usual creak of the handle, the familiar thump of the lock sticking before it gave way. Except it didn't give. I jiggled the key, then pulled it out and tried again. Nothing. That's when I noticed the sticky note. It was taped crookedly on the upper panel of the door, written in my mother's delicate, practiced cursive, like it belonged on a casserole dish or a Christmas card. You chose distance. Stay there. No salutation, no signature. Just that one line. I stood there, motionless, for longer than I care to admit. I don't know what I expected. Maybe confusion, maybe guilt. But mostly, I felt hollow. Not shocked, not outraged. Just a quiet ache in the place where family is supposed to live. I turned around and scanned the porch. To the right, beside the faded bench where my dad used to read the Sunday paper, were 3 black trash bags. One of them was torn open at the top, revealing a stack of neatly folded dish towels and a yellow mixing bowl I'd bought when I was 23. My belongings, bagged and waiting like expired groceries. I sat down on the front step and took a slow, deep breath. The kind of breath they'd taught me to take in the hospital to keep my lungs open. Then I pulled out my checkbook. It had been a while since I'd written one. Most things were digital now, but this moment demanded paper, ink, proof. I wrote out a check for $1. In the memo line, I scrawled, "For everything you never paid me back for." I folded it into a plain envelope, along with a typed letter I'd printed earlier that morning. "This is the last transaction between us. Every other debt is emotional, and I'm done being your creditor." I placed the envelope in the mailbox beside the door, flipped the red flag up, and walked back to my car. I didn't look back. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop and began severing ties. First, I pulled up the utility accounts. Electricity, terminated. Gas, removed my name from the bill. Water, internet, phone plan, all gone. Then came the bigger ones. Health insurance, canceled the family policy I'd been paying out of pocket. Car insurance, removed my parents' vehicles from my multi-car discount. Mortgage, contacted the bank and submitted a formal request to be removed as co-signer. It would trigger a refinancing process. If they couldn't meet the requirements, they'd lose the house. I paused before making that last call. It wasn't revenge, it was release. For too long, I'd been the oxygen to a system that kept me gasping. Once everything was done, I left a voicemail. "You want full control?" I said. "Now you have it. All the bills, too." That night, I changed the locks on my own door. The locksmith came at 6:30. By 7:15, the deadbolt clicked smoothly, and the extra keys were in my drawer, not in someone else's purse or pocket. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The sun had dipped below the trees, casting long shadows on the street. I didn't feel powerful or brave, just clean. Like something had been washed away that had clung to me for far too long. Around 8 o'clock, the buzzer rang. It was Sarah, a friend from work. She held up a bottle of wine and a paper bag. "No excuses. You've earned a drink and real food," she said as I opened the door. We sat on the floor and ate Thai takeout with plastic forks. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer advice. She just passed the soy sauce when I reached for it. Before she left, she handed me a card. Inside was a note written in purple ink. "You are not alone anymore." It was simple, not poetic, but it landed. I hadn't told her about the note on the door, or the trash bags, or the check. But she knew. Somehow, she knew. The next morning, I opened my calendar and marked key dates. Court hearings, financial reviews, debt reevaluation. Not as a reminder, but as milestones. Every entry was a step forward. I lit a candle and let the silence fill the room. No voices, no demands. No guilt trips or gaslighting, just peace. And me, sitting in a space I paid for, with locks I chose, surrounded by things no one could claim they gave me. I used to write checks to keep the peace, begging with money, bargaining with silence. Now I wrote my name on the walls they thought would never belong to me. The shift was almost too predictable. I'd barely started reclaiming my name before they decided to hijack the narrative. That's how it always went, didn't it? The moment you stop apologizing for existing, the world that benefited from your silence accuses you of shouting. It began with a message from a former coworker. "Hey Gemma, just checking in. I saw something online. Are you okay?" Another ping followed. Then 3 more. "Have you read the interview?" "Wow, didn't expect to see you in headlines. Callista's blog feature is trending. You might want to look." I didn't want to look, but I did. The article was hosted on a popular lifestyle site, one Callista had guest written for before. This one was titled, "My Sister's Mental Breakdown and Why I Had to Protect Our Parents." My stomach clenched before I even scrolled past the headline. Callista, in her signature style, opened with a photo of herself in soft lighting, framed by flowers and glowing in faux humility. The article read like a diary entry soaked in public relations gloss. She used to be so bright. But over time, something changed. She started accusing us of stealing, of lying, even of wishing her harm. She pushed everyone away, insisted on control over everything, even our family's finances. She wasn't always like this, but sometimes, the mind plays tricks when pain is left unchecked. And then, the quote from my mother. "It's heartbreaking to see her destroy everything we built for her. We just want her back." What had they built for me? A lifetime of being useful, but never celebrated. Of funding their comfort while swallowing their condescension? The worst part wasn't the lies. It was the fact that they knew exactly which truths to twist. The story was going viral, fast. By the next morning, the blog's comment section was closed, but the screenshots had already spread. I started getting tagged on Facebook. A few acquaintances messaged me directly, not to pry, but to say they'd seen it, that they were sorry, that they didn't believe it. Not really. Still, the whispers had begun. 2 days later, Callista went live. A curated backdrop, fresh-cut peonies, golden hour lighting, a cup of untouched tea beside her. She looked appropriately tired, as if she'd been carrying this pain for too long. "I just want to say thank you to everyone who's reached out," she began. This wasn't easy to share, but I felt I had to speak up, not to blame, but to help. Her voice cracked, perfectly timed. We've tried everything, therapy, patience, space, but sometimes love isn't enough. And when someone refuses to get help, the family suffers in silence. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, watching her reel in sympathy like it was her birthright. "We still love her," she continued. "Of course we do, but you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped." And that's when it happened. The chat, once full of hearts and encouragement, began to shift. A comment appeared. "Didn't you post beach selfies while your sister was in the ICU?" Another one followed. "Screenshots say otherwise." Then another. "That maybe dying message wasn't photoshopped, Callista. We all saw it." I watched the screen as the momentum flipped. More users dropped receipts, old posts, deleted tweets, comments from my page, side-by-side comparisons of Callista's story with actual timelines. One person uploaded the vacation reel, captioned, "Living my best life with my favorite people," posted 2 hours after my ICU admission timestamp. And then the hashtag started trending. #JusticeForGemma. Brands began pulling back. A small skincare company she endorsed released a statement distancing themselves from unverified narratives causing community distress. A major supplement line removed her image from their Instagram feed. The influencer house she occasionally collaborated with. They unfollowed her quietly, then publicly backed a wellness creator who made a video titled, "What Happens When Healing Hurts Someone Else." One of the wedding vendors she stiffed tweeted, "Turns out the quiet sister was the strong one all along." I didn't have to say a word. Vera tried next. She released a statement through some community church bulletin board, just vague enough to sound spiritual. just sharp enough to imply victimhood. Families face trials, it said, but some choose bitterness over healing. We continue to pray for those who've lost their way. When asked about the legal filings, Vera stumbled. She told a small local journalist, "It's not like we were trying to take her life over. We were worried. That's what mothers do." Except mothers don't falsify medical evaluations and try to claim guardianship of their adult daughters while they're unconscious. I said nothing. No press release. No rebuttal interview. No setting the record straight. Instead, I posted one sentence on my private page. I told the truth to the people who mattered. The rest can read between the lies. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't viral ready. But it was mine. Within an hour, friends shared it. Co-workers reshared. A few of Callista's former collaborators commented things like, "I knew something felt off." Some strangers added hearts. Others just said, "This hit home." By the end of the day, the post had reached more people than any campaign I'd ever paid for. Not because I shouted, because I didn't. Because when a house of cards falls, you don't need to yell to be heard. You just need to stand still and let the wind do its job. They'd gotten loud, desperate, theatrical, full of performative grief. And it backfired. I didn't need to scream. All I had to do was show up and let their words hang themselves. The morning of the hearing, I woke before the alarm. I had laid my clothes out the night before. Navy suit, low-heeled black pumps, a soft cream blouse that I'd bought last year but hadn't worn yet. The kind of outfit that didn't shout power, but wore it quietly, like a well-fitted truth. It wasn't just another court date. It was the day I stepped into the room where they thought they'd narrate my story without me. Downtown traffic was light. My Uber driver made polite small talk about the weather. I nodded and smiled at the right moments, though I wasn't really listening. My mind was full of folders, timelines, emails, recordings, every scrap of proof I had carefully gathered and double-checked. Outside the courthouse, I paused to take one breath. Just one. And then I walked in. They were already there. Callista sat to the right, in a pale lavender dress and nude heels, looking like she was waiting for a brunch reservation, not a legal reckoning. Vera was beside her, wrapped in a beige shawl, dabbing at her eyes before anyone had said a word. Their lawyer looked polished, expensive, the kind who got paid in image control and silence agreements. I walked past them without stopping. I didn't nod, didn't flinch. I kept my focus on the courtroom door ahead. Inside, the space felt colder than I expected. Pale wood benches, flickering overhead lights, a judge whose face was unreadable. "Ms. Vexley," the judge said, adjusting her glasses as she looked over the docket. "You're here to respond to a guardianship petition filed by Vera Thorne and Callista Greaves?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice steady. "And you've submitted a countersuit?" "Yes." She nodded once. "Let's proceed. Do you have evidence to support your claims?" I opened my laptop. Plugged in the HDMI cable. The screen behind me lit up. "This," I said, "is the financial timeline. Slide 1. A spreadsheet showing every dollar I'd contributed to my parents' mortgage, my sister's business, their utilities, their vacations. Slide 2. Timestamps from my hospital stay, showing the exact hours I was sedated, overlapped with screenshots of purchases made using my accounts. Slide 3. The text message. Callista's now infamous line, "Maybe dying will finally make you interesting." I watched the judge's jaw tighten as she read it. "I'd like to submit that as Exhibit A," I said calmly. Callista's attorney tried to object, but the judge waved it off. "Continue." I nodded, changed the slide. "This," I said, "is the clip." The screen played a short video. Callista, during her Hawaii trip, laughing over cocktails, her voice clear, unfiltered. "If she croaks, maybe I'll finally get that apartment." Gasps rippled through the room. Vera turned to her lawyer, whispering furiously. Callista's face went pale. She stood up. "That's out of context," she blurted. The judge raised a hand. "Sit down, Ms. from Greaves. We're not finished." Their attorney fumbled, asking for a recess. Denied. I continued. Quiet, direct. This is not about revenge, I told the judge. This is about control. I was unconscious in a hospital bed. They filed for guardianship. They tried to take everything I had left, and when that wasn't enough, they tried to rewrite me as a villain who needed saving. I paused. They didn't expect me to get up. The room was still. The judge leaned back in her chair, silent for a long moment before speaking. The guardianship is denied, effective immediately. Ms. Vexley retains all legal and financial authority. I closed my laptop. The court also finds sufficient grounds to refer Mrs. Thorne's claims to Adult Protective Services for fraud investigation. Vera looked like she'd been slapped. Furthermore, the judge added, any joint accounts, financial ties, or obligations Ms. Vexley had with either petitioner are hereby dissolved by court order. Callista sat down slowly, as if her knees had finally caught up with her conscience. Vera whispered, "This is outrageous. We did this for her." The judge didn't even blink. "You did this for yourselves." Outside the courthouse, a small group of reporters had gathered. Someone shouted my name. "Gemma, do you have a comment?" I kept walking. The flash of cameras followed, but I didn't stop. At the bottom of the steps, a woman in a blazer blocked my path gently. "Ms. Vexley, I'm from the Oregon Financial Abuse Prevention Task Force. We'd like to talk if you're willing." I handed her my lawyer's card. "No comment," I said. "The truth's been filed." Back in my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. My phone buzzed, not with attacks, but with thank yous. Coworkers, old friends. 2 vendors from Callista's wedding. Even a stranger who'd followed the case online. One message stood out. "You didn't just protect yourself. You showed people how to stand up without screaming." The next day, I got word that Vera's retirement benefits had been suspended pending investigation. Her church removed her from the community board. Callista's agent quietly terminated their contract. Sponsors dropped out. One by one, the lights she'd depended on flickered out. They built their lives on my silence, and I ended their empire with a single sentence. The week after the court ruling moved by in a strange haze. There were no more depositions, no more press calls, no more urgent folders waiting to be opened. Just long walks through my Portland neighborhood, where leaves were beginning to turn and familiar storefronts waved back in soft recognition. For the first time in years, I wasn't anticipating crisis. I wasn't planning my next defense. I was just breathing. One afternoon, as I walked into the neighborhood hardware store to buy light bulbs and a replacement for the drawer handle my dog had chewed on, I passed a shelf near the back that stopped me cold. It was an old transistor radio, dusty, the kind with a large dial and antenna that bent in a way that felt nostalgic, not broken. I reached for it slowly, held it in both hands, and in that moment, my body was no longer standing in a narrow aisle. It was 15 years ago. Summer. Heat thick in the garage. My father crouched beside me, sleeves rolled up, grinning like we were building a rocket ship. "Wires don't mean much unless they're connected, right?" he had said, handing me the tiny screwdriver. "But even then, not everything broken is ruined, Gemma." Back then, I believed him. And when I'd found myself half-conscious in a hospital bed, Callista filing for control of my life, I had nearly signed the paper they sent. Power of attorney. Just to make the noise stop. But something, maybe that memory, had frozen my hand. Made me ask the nurse to hold it for one more day. That radio had saved more than one life. I brought it to the counter. The clerk didn't charge me. "Old thing like that?" He smiled. "It needs someone who remembers how to listen." A few weeks later, on a chilly Friday morning, my phone rang. "Hey, it's Sebastian, my father's nephew. We hadn't spoken in years, not since Grandma's funeral." "I just wanted you to know," he said. "Not everyone believed them. Some of us. We watched. We remembered." He told me Vera was now renting a room from a friend of hers, someone from church, that she'd stepped down from all her committees and hadn't been seen at the farmer's market in months. Callista, he said, had picked up part-time work at a marketing agency. Her influencer gigs had dried up. Sponsors pulled out quietly, and she hadn't posted in weeks. "You were never loud," Sebastian added, But they forgot that silence has its own kind of weight. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's what makes this matter more." I didn't cry after the call. I didn't feel triumphant, just grounded, like my feet were finally planted somewhere they belonged. Spring gave way to summer, and then to early fall. The garden behind my apartment, once cluttered with overgrown lavender and forgotten tomato vines, was cleared, replanted, and blooming. Tom and I said our vows under the canopy of lights strung across the backyard. No grand speeches, no "we overcame everything" cliches, just soft words exchanged between two people who had learned how to listen to silence. Juno handed me the bouquet. Tom's mother buttoned the back of my dress, her fingers steady and warm. A neighbor brought pie. Another brought extra chairs. One of my coworkers offered to take photos, refusing payment. As the sun dipped and laughter swelled under twinkling lights, I whispered to myself, this is what family actually feels like. No conditions, no currency, just care. Weeks later, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was from Callista, not an apology, a plea. "Can we talk? I'm lost." No specifics, no acknowledgement of what she'd done, just a thin thread dangling in a sea of everything she had cut. I stood at my kitchen counter with the envelope still open in my hand. For a moment, I considered replying. Instead, I folded the letter carefully, walked it over to my desk, and slid it into the bottom drawer. No anger, no judgment, just a decision. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up a draft I'd been working on, a blog post I hadn't shared yet. Title: When Blood Is Not Bond, Choosing to Stay Whole. It started with the line, "I stopped measuring love by DNA when I realized harm didn't need to be a stranger to be real." I closed the lid gently. I'd carried a lot of things in this life, burdens dressed as duty, silence disguised as peace. But now I was choosing differently. I don't want revenge anymore. I want joy. And that's the only thing they truly never gave me. But I've now given myself. In life, not all betrayals come from strangers. Some wear the face of family. Sometimes, choosing peace means walking away from those who expect your silence to fund their comfort. What would you do if the people closest to you tried to rewrite your story? If this story moved you, drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Would you have walked away or fought back? Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories just like this one. Hello, my name is Sabrina, and for most of my life, I was the quiet one. Easy to overlook, easier to dismiss. At my father's birthday party, I wore a sapphire necklace my grandmother left me. Nothing flashy, just something that made me feel seen. My sister laughed in front of everyone, called it cheap junk, and by the time the night was over, it had vanished. Then came the memes, the silence, the message. If something worthless disappears, why make a scene? But what if the necklace wasn't worthless? And what if the theft wasn't the beginning, but the final straw in a family that never really saw me at all? What happens when the one they always silenced speaks? The scent of grilled sea bass and lemon zest drifted from the outdoor kitchen, mixing with the faint salt of the ocean breeze. It was the kind of golden California evening people posted about. Warm, photogenic, perfectly choreographed to look spontaneous. My father's 70th birthday had brought together the usual suspects, our family, his business partners, a few retired surgeons from his golf club, and of course, my sister's entourage. I arrived precisely on time, not fashionably late like Callista always did, nor early enough to be roped into helping out like in years past. I wore the necklace. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. A deep blue sapphire hung from a white gold chain, understated, elegant. It had belonged to my grandmother, Evelyn, who used to tell me I had eyes sharp enough to spot truth buried in stone. The necklace had never been appraised. It was never about price. It was about her and me and the one person in this family who looked at me and didn't see the extra. I kept to myself mostly, drifting between conversations, smiling politely at stories I'd heard before. I wasn't there to outshine anyone. I just wanted to be seen, for once, not as the afterthought, but as someone worth a second glance. Then came Callista. Wearing a dress that could have doubled as a red carpet gown, she breezed in with perfect timing, pausing just long enough near the entrance to let everyone absorb her arrival. Her makeup was flawless, her nails painted like she'd never had a dishwashing moment in her life. People clapped. My father beamed. She hugged everyone like she'd invented affection, then sauntered up to me, her voice just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Oh, Sabrina, is that your jewelry, or did someone lose a charm from a vending machine?" She smirked, not even bothering to wait for a reaction. Laughter. Not a roar, but enough. A chuckle from a cousin. A smirk from Uncle Pete. I caught the eye of a woman I didn't recognize. She looked down quickly. I felt it then. The heat rising behind my ears. The sharp, invisible knife of public humiliation. But I didn't flinch. I didn't even touch the necklace. That would have been surrender. I just smiled and said, "It was a gift," before walking away, pretending not to hear the second wave of soft laughter that followed. Later that night, after the cake, after the toasts, after everyone had posed for photos where I stood slightly off to the side, I drove home with the kind of silence that didn't need music. My apartment was cool and quiet, untouched by curated smiles and champagne. I set my purse down, took off my heels, and went to remove the necklace. Except, it wasn't there. I froze. I always stored it in the inner coat lining when I traveled with it. A small velvet box tucked away, hidden from eyes and fingers. But it was gone. I checked my purse, the car, my jacket pockets, the bathroom counter. Nothing. My hands began to tremble. I called my cousin Marlene, who'd helped clean up earlier. "Hey, it's probably nothing," I began, trying to keep my voice light. "But did you see a sapphire necklace? I think it might have slipped off, or—" "Oh, Sabrina," she interrupted, laughing lightly. "You and your dramatics. It was probably some costume piece, right? Don't stress over $5 flair." I said nothing. I just thanked her and hung up. It was almost midnight. I sat on the edge of my bed, the room dim except for the soft glow of my bedside lamp. I should have cried, but I didn't. Instead, I stared at the wall and tried to remember every moment of the party. Had I removed it? Had someone bumped into me? Had I forgotten? But no, I remembered clearly. I remembered Callista reaching out to fix my hair, brushing the chain briefly with her fingers. I remembered her saying, "It's barely noticeable anyway." I didn't sleep that night, not because of the necklace, but because of what losing it confirmed. No one noticed, no one cared. And if they had taken it, it was because they assumed it wasn't worth anything. The next morning, I reached for my phone, eyes still puffy from staring at nothing all night. That's when I saw it. A new message in the family group chat. It was a meme. A photo of a child wearing plastic princess jewelry, overlaid with bold text. "When you lose your $5 necklace and act like the crown jewels were stolen." Posted by my cousin Nate, liked by Callista. I didn't cry, not then. But something shifted, quietly, deeply, and it wasn't going back. I didn't respond to the meme. I didn't delete it either. I just stared at it, let it linger like stale perfume. The image, cheap plastic necklace on a child's neck, glitter smeared across her cheek like a crown of ridicule, was clearly meant for me. The caption read, $5 royalty? My cousin Nate had posted it. Underneath, a trail of laugh reacts followed. My father's thumbs up. My mother's so true. Callista, of course, didn't comment. She never needed to. Her silence was always her signature. I took a screenshot. I didn't send it to anyone. Didn't say a word in the chat. Just tucked it into a folder I'd recently created on my phone titled Receipts. I'd learned from past mistakes that people like my sister only respected silence if it could come back to bite. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I made coffee not because I needed caffeine, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the rest of the group chat, noting how not one person had checked in on me after the party, not even to pretend. It wasn't just about the necklace. It was about what it revealed, the casual cruelty my family had normalized for so long, the way they laughed off my hurt, as if the idea of me being hurt was funny in and of itself, as if the mere suggestion that something I owned might be valuable or meaningful was absurd. At noon, I showered, changed into something presentable, and headed to the office. Mondays were slow. I worked for a private insurance firm that specialized in high-value assets, fine art, luxury watches, rare gemstones. I reviewed appraisals, verified authenticity, updated valuations for clients who lived in worlds I'd never touch. Funny, isn't it? I was trusted to verify $100,000 emeralds, but when it came to my own family, I was accused of clinging to costume jewelry. Around 2:15 that afternoon, I was halfway through verifying a series of estate diamond earrings when my phone rang. The name on the screen made me pause. Jenna Valente. We hadn't spoken in at least 3 years. We met during our gemologist certification training. She had a sharp eye and an even sharper memory. I hesitated, then answered. Sabrina Rayner, I said. A pause, then, wow, still so formal. Hey, it's Jenna. Hey, I replied, unsure where this was going. So, random question, she said. At your dad's birthday last weekend, were you wearing a deep blue sapphire? Oval cut, white gold setting? My throat tightened. Yeah. Why? She exhaled into the phone. Someone I follow posted a short video from the party. I saw a flash of the necklace before the story got taken down. That's not costume. If it's what I think it is, that stone's a cashmere salon cut. Probably low 6 figures. I swallowed hard. You're sure? Dead sure, she said. It had that slight violet undertone, very rare. I only noticed because I appraised something similar last month for a private collector in Santa Barbara. My voice was flat. Well, it's missing now. A pause. Oh. Yeah, I said, forcing myself to sound unfazed. No one's taken it seriously. They think it's a knockoff. They're wrong, Jenna said quietly. And if you ever need a second signature or support, I've got you. We hung up. I didn't go back to the diamonds. Instead, I left the office early and drove home, heart pounding. Once inside, I headed straight to the small safe in my bedroom closet. I spun the dial slowly, deliberately, like I was preparing for a moment I knew would change everything. The folder was there, sealed in a clear envelope, labeled EV, Evelyn's Estate. I carried it to the living room, sat cross-legged on the floor, and opened it. Inside, neatly folded, was the certified appraisal form dated March 12, 2003. Salon-cut cashmere sapphire, 8.7 carats. Estimated valuation, $117,000. Signed by an independent appraiser. Insured under Evelyn Rayner's Legacy Trust. Beneficiary, Sabrina Ann Rayner. There was no ambiguity, no misinterpretation. I stared at the document for a long while, letting the truth sink in. Not just the monetary value, but the confirmation that my grandmother had meant for me to have something precious, something real. And they all knew. My mother, my father, Callista. Even her husband, a family attorney, had glanced over the estate summary at the time. They hadn't forgotten. They'd just chosen not to remember. It wasn't ignorance, it was erasure. I slid the documents back into the envelope, careful not to crease the paper, and placed it back in the safe. Then I stood, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank email draft for several minutes before typing. Subject: To whom it may concern, legal inquiry regarding personal asset theft. I didn't send it yet, but the cursor blinked back at me like a dare. That night, I couldn't sleep. Again. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow from the hallway nightlight casting faint lines across the white paint. Every moment from the party looped in my mind like a scene I wished I could rewrite. Callista's fingers brushing my collarbone under the guise of fixing my necklace, her casual smirk, the weight of people's laughter. I'd let it go too many times, the teasing, the microaggressions, the assumption that because I didn't speak up, I didn't have anything to say. But that night, something changed, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, inside me. I got up, padded into the living room, and poured myself a glass of water. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened a second folder on my computer. This one I titled, Truth They Won't Acknowledge Yet. And I began uploading everything I had. The email draft still sat unsent when I walked into my closet, I wasn't even sure why I went in there, maybe to get some air, or maybe just to move. My hands were restless. I needed to do something with them. I found myself staring at the old cedar chest shoved into the back corner, hidden behind a row of off-season coats I hadn't touched in a year. The scent hit me first: lavender, worn cedar wood, and a hint of something that made me think of Grandma Evelyn's living room in the fall. I knelt down, brushed away the light layer of dust that had settled on the lid, and opened it. Inside, the contents were exactly as I remembered: her hand-knit scarves, yellowed recipe cards written in her confident cursive, a broken brooch she never got around to fixing. And beneath it all, an envelope, cream-colored, thick. My name was written across the front in ink that had faded just slightly, but still held its shape. For Sabrina, if I'm not around. I took a breath and opened it, hands shaking, though I wasn't sure why. I hadn't even realized she'd left me anything besides the necklace. The paper crackled softly as I unfolded it, and then there it was. Her voice, in her words. My darling girl, if you're reading this, I'm not with you anymore. And that breaks my heart. I've always watched you. Quiet, observant, stronger than they knew. You didn't yell to be heard, you listened. And when you did speak, it was always something worth hearing. That is a gift, Sabrina. Don't let them tell you otherwise. They never asked what you needed. You gave without being asked, and they took without giving back. That necklace, yes, it's valuable, but that's not why I gave it to you. I gave it to you because it belonged to someone who never needed a spotlight to shine. Just like you. Callista always needed attention. You, my dear, simply needed to be seen. Love, Grandma. Evelyn. I read it 3 times before I allowed myself to feel it. I cried, but not the loud, gut-wrenching sobs, just slow, quiet tears that slid down my cheeks like they'd been waiting years to fall. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, I didn't feel angry. I felt understood. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. Then I went back to the safe and pulled out the appraisal again, placed it next to the letter, and laid both down on my desk under the soft lamplight. There was something grounding about seeing them side by side. The cold, hard proof, the legal document that spoke in numbers and weight, and the soft, personal truth, handwritten by someone who had seen me even when I felt invisible. I printed a copy of the appraisal, scanned the letter, and added them both to a new digital folder titled Proof, Legal. Then, I took a breath and opened another tab. Screenshots from the group chat, every mocking meme, every comment that dismissed my voice, dragged in, photos from the party, including a blurry one showing Callista behind me during the toast, her hand awkwardly near my collarbone, my signed insurance registration from the original estate packet. All of it went in. The folder filled, line by line, like pieces of a puzzle that no longer made me question if I was overreacting. I wasn't. I had been dismissed, disrespected, and now I had evidence. Not to start a war, but to end the narrative that I was making this up. The sky outside darkened gradually, shifting from pale amber to deep navy as I sat in silence, watching the upload progress bar crawl across the screen. A sense of calm replaced the raw ache I'd been carrying since that night. I picked up Evelyn's letter again and traced her handwriting with my finger, the curls of her S's, the steadiness of her lines. It felt like she was there beside me, reminding me I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't wrong for wanting to protect something that mattered. My last memory of her was a quiet afternoon, 6 months before she passed. She'd invited me over for tea, just me, not Callista, not anyone else. She'd made her favorite lemon bars and served tea in mismatched porcelain cups. We'd talked about books, the weather, her neighbors' cats. Nothing profound on the surface, but toward the end, she reached across the table, gently took my hand and said, "I wish more people saw you the way I do." I didn't know what to say at the time. I just smiled. But that sentence has lived inside me ever since. I returned the letter to its envelope, slid it back into the cedar chest, and closed the lid with care. Later that evening, I reheated some leftover soup and sat on the couch, legs curled beneath me, Laptop open again. I clicked through the proof. Legal folder, double-checking everything. It wasn't about revenge. It was about acknowledgement, about not being erased. Around 10 p.m., I was shutting down for the night when my phone buzzed with a new notification. A calendar invite. Title: Family Dinner Time, Sunday, 6:00 p.m. Location: Home. Sent by Dad. No note, no explanation, no apology. I stared at the screen for a long while. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but I didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, I let the screen dim and rested the phone face down on the coffee table. Some part of me knew they were going to pretend nothing had happened, and another part of me was ready for that. The clip finished uploading just before midnight. I watched the progress bar disappear and sat back in my chair, the silence in my apartment suddenly deafening. I didn't know what I'd do with the video yet, whether I'd send it to the group, to a lawyer, or just let it sit there in its quiet defiance, but I knew one thing: it existed now. The truth was no longer something I carried alone in my head. It had weight, pixels, timestamps. I closed the laptop and stood, stretching out the tension in my shoulders. I was halfway to brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed again. Calendar invite. From my father. Family dinner. This Sunday at 6 p.m. Home. No message, no subject line, just an automated invite from a man who had, not 48 hours ago, liked a meme mocking me in front of the entire family. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. The audacity would have been impressive if it hadn't been so painfully familiar. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. I debated canceling, more than once, but there was something about it that felt like a test, and I was tired of failing theirs, so I dressed simply. No necklace this time, just a dark blouse and a blazer. I packed the appraisal documents, the insurance forms, and Evelyn's letter into a folder and slipped it into my bag like armor. I pulled into the driveway at 5:50 p.m. The house looked exactly the same: manicured hedges, white trim, porch light on a timer, comfortable, sterile, controlled, like everything my parents had ever curated. I stepped inside without ringing the bell. The door was already ajar. No one greeted me. From the dining room, I heard the low hum of casual chatter and the clink of silverware against fine china. The house smelled like rosemary chicken and fresh bread, everything choreographed, as always. I hung my coat on the rack, adjusted my posture, and walked in. Callista sat at the center of the table, glowing like a showroom dummy in a cream cashmere wrap. My mother flanked one end of the table, my father the other, sipping his usual red blend with a content expression. The rest of the seats were filled with familiar faces, relatives who never spoke unless prompted, and even then, only in socially approved sentences. "Look who finally showed," Callista said with a tight smile, as if my presence had thrown off her tempo. I didn't respond. I nodded to the room and took the empty seat left for me, second from the end, far from the center. Dinner began with meaningless updates. Someone's dog had surgery. My uncle had switched insurance providers. My father talked about a golf tournament he'd been watching. No one mentioned the necklace, not one word, as if it had never happened. I let them speak. I didn't interrupt. I waited. When the table reached that inevitable lull, the pause where everyone checks to see if dessert is coming, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I set it gently in the center of the table and opened it. No preamble, no announcement. The appraisal sat on top, crisp and official. Beneath it, the insurance documents. And then, in Evelyn's unmistakable handwriting, her letter. Callista's fork stopped mid-air. My father cleared his throat. My mother's eyes flicked from the paper to me, then quickly back to her wine. "This again?" Callista said, the corner of her mouth twitching like she wanted to laugh but couldn't quite commit. I met her gaze. "This always, because no one else is willing to say it." Elaine sighed softly, almost regretfully. "Callista was just joking at the party, dear. You always take things so seriously." I turned to my father. "You signed the transfer paperwork. You saw the valuation. You knew what Evelyn left me." He blinked slowly. "If it was so valuable," he said, "why wear it to a party? Seems careless." I looked down at the table, then back at them all. Because I wanted to feel like I belonged, for once, like I was part of something that mattered to this family. Silence fell over the room. Not the uncomfortable kind, the kind that settles like dust after something breaks. Callista reached for her wine and swirled it lazily. I don't recall seeing any necklace. Perhaps someone else took it. You know how chaotic these events can be. I smiled tightly. The video says otherwise, but I'll let that speak for itself soon. Her fingers stilled. For a split second, something passed across her face. Doubt. Maybe. Fear. Then it was gone. My mother shifted in her chair. Sabrina, this isn't the time or place. No, I said, standing. This is exactly the time and place, because if I don't say this here, I never will. My father stood too, as if trying to re-establish control of the room. Let's not ruin a perfectly nice dinner. It was already ruined, I replied. You just didn't notice because it wasn't your plate that was empty. And with that, I picked up the folder, tucked it back into my bag, and left the room. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam doors. I walked through the hall, past the portraits, past the curated family smiles, and stepped into the night. Outside, the air was cool. Not cold, but enough to clear my head. I got in my car and sat in the driver's seat, hands resting on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was clarity. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to acknowledge what had happened. Not unless they were forced to. And I was done begging. Back at home, I poured myself a glass of water, opened my laptop, and clicked on the folder titled, Truth They Won't Acknowledge Yet. Then I uploaded the video, not to social media, not to a group chat, to a private, time-stamped storage file with a shareable link and a password-protected log. Let them laugh now. Their silence was my answer. The notification lingered on my screen. Subject, asset theft case, preliminary steps. It didn't surprise me. Ellison didn't just offer support for show. He moved, quietly, efficiently, like someone who'd seen too many people backpedal under family pressure. I clicked the email open. It was from a friend of his at a boutique legal firm in La Jolla. A woman named Dana Voss, short, to the point. Hi Sabrina, Ellison brought your case to my attention. I've reviewed the documentation. If you're ready to proceed, I suggest we begin with a formal filing of theft, including the submitted footage and inheritance records. Attached is an intake form. No pressure, but whenever you're ready. All best, Dana Voss, JD. I sat there for a long time, rereading the email in silence. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real. Tangible. It had moved past group chats and family dinners, past eye rolls and gaslighting. It was now a line in the sand. I didn't reply right away. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the soft click of the lid act like punctuation on the moment. That evening, after dinner, I changed into a hoodie and pulled my hair into a messy bun. I needed to see the footage again. Needed to remind myself that I wasn't inventing this, that I wasn't being dramatic or too sensitive, like they always said. I opened the folder, clicked on the file labeled partyfootage.mov, and watched it roll. It was grainy, filmed by someone's phone, clearly not intended to catch what it did. The guest filming had been standing near the fireplace, focusing on my father making a speech. Everyone was gathered, glasses raised, smiles plastered. In the background, barely noticeable at first, was me, talking to Aunt Rhonda, and behind me, Callista. She slid in, seemingly adjusting my hair, laughing as she did it. But the hand that moved toward my shoulder dipped just slightly. A quick motion, a flick of her fingers, and then, gone. She turned, and her clutch was in her other hand, slightly fuller. Time-stamped. Clear. Undeniable. I didn't need narration. I didn't need to defend what was visible. This time, I didn't hesitate. I downloaded the video file, opened a fresh email, and addressed it to 3 recipients: Arthur Rayner, Elaine Rayner, and Callista Verne. Subject, formal evidence submission, private family incident. No message, just the clip. I attached the letter from Evelyn, the appraisal, the photos. Then I hit send. That was it. I pushed back from the desk, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands trembled, not with fear, but release. I had finally said it out loud, in the way that mattered. The silence that followed was thicker than anything I'd felt in the house growing up. No reply that night. No, let's talk. No, what is this? Not even a curt, dismissive emoji. Just silence. The next morning, I checked the email. All 3 had been opened. Still nothing. By the second day, the group chat went quiet. No memes, no passive-aggressive, just checking-in messages. No subtle digs, just a digital void. Until Callista's Instagram story, a photo of her sipping wine by her pool, captioned in elegant script font. Some people get bitter instead of better. I rolled my eyes, took a screenshot, added it to the folder. Legal, in motion. Ellison messaged me that evening. Saw Callista's post. What's happening? I didn't sugarcoat it. I sent him the clip. No explanation, no context. 30 seconds later, you're not crazy, and you're not alone. Then a follow-up. If you decide to escalate, I'll stand with you. I stared at those words longer than I expected. The phrasing caught me. Not I'll protect you, not I'll fix this, just I'll stand with you. I didn't realize how much I'd needed that. No fanfare, no savior complex, just quiet, steady presence. I didn't write back. Instead, I opened my laptop again and created a new folder titled Legal, in Motion. Everything went in. Every file, every screenshot, every scan. Evelyn's letter, the insurance records, the video, the photos, the meme, Callista's story. A digital archive of being erased and reclaiming space. Then I sat back and stared at it, feeling something shift deep inside me. Let them sit with their silence. I'd made my move. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hurt. It was strategy. I wouldn't scream in their faces. I wouldn't beg them to do what they never intended to do. Instead, I would let the evidence speak louder than my voice ever had. Just as I was about to shut down for the night, my screen blinked with a new notification, a name I didn't recognize. From Dana Voss. Subject, Asset Theft Case, Preliminary Steps. I opened it. She outlined the process, explained next steps, asked for a preferred timeline, mentioned the strength of the video. Then she added one final line. When they assume you won't do anything, doing something is a full sentence. The folder felt heavier than paper. Tucked under my arm as I walked into Dana Voss's office, it seemed to carry not only the documents, but every word they never let me say. The space smelled faintly of eucalyptus and leather, minimalist decor, glass walls, firm rugs underfoot, clean, professional, and not a single trace of my family. She greeted me in a tailored navy dress, her hand extended firmly. Sabrina, welcome. Come in. Let's get to work. I sat, spine straight, legs crossed, every muscle aware of itself. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about air, about breathing freely for the first time since the party. She opened the folder slowly, reviewing each page without commentary. The appraisal, the video stills, screenshots of the group chat, Evelyn's letter, Callista's social media story, all lined up like facts in a courtroom I hadn't entered yet. When she looked up, she didn't blink. We'll file for asset theft, defamation, and emotional distress, she said, her voice crisp. Given the clear evidence and the value of the piece, this is a strong case. You okay with this becoming official? I nodded. I didn't start this, but I'm ending it. Dana smiled faintly, like someone who'd heard those words said too late before. Then we begin today. It was Thursday. That Sunday, I found myself pulling into the family driveway again. The house hadn't changed, still picture-perfect from the outside, still emotionally hollow within. I hesitated before stepping out. Not out of fear, but out of resolve. I needed to be clear, calm, collected. There wouldn't be another conversation. This was it. Inside, the dining room was already buzzing. Callista, of course, sat in her usual spot. She wore a sage green dress this time, soft curls carefully arranged, diamond studs winking from her ears. Beside her, my parents were mid-conversation with Aunt Joanne about patio renovations. I walked in unannounced. No one stood to greet me. Callista glanced up, her smile tight. Came to stir more drama. You always find a way to make it about you. I set my folder on the table and opened it without responding. Arthur, my father, barely looked up. You've always been the one who can't let go of little things. I met his gaze directly. This isn't about a thing. This is about the principle. I unfolded the contents with deliberate calm, like a surgeon prepping for incision, appraisal on top. Then the legal statement, screenshots, video stills. I'm filing by Friday, I said, voice steady. If the necklace is returned in full condition, I will reconsider further action. If not, it becomes legal. Callista scoffed. You wouldn't dare. Family doesn't take family to court. I looked her straight in the eyes. You stopped being family the moment you stole from me and laughed about it. She blinked. No smirk, no comeback. For once, her mouth had no script to follow. Elaine cleared her throat. Honey, let's not do this here. I am doing it here, I said, turning to her. Because every time you told me not to make a scene, you gave permission to the ones who did. The room fell into a silence so deep it almost felt like an earthquake. Not loud, but everything shifted. Just then, the front door opened. Ellison. He walked in uninvited, carrying nothing but his own quiet confidence. He wore a dark button-down and that slight crease between his brows he always had when he smelled injustice. Sabrina's not alone anymore, he said, addressing the room like a press conference. He looked directly at Arthur. You taught her to be quiet. Now you'll learn how loud the truth can be. My father straightened. Not defensively, just uncomfortably. Ellison continued. We've reviewed the footage, the letter, the documentation. We have legal support. And no amount of ignoring it will change what happened. I didn't look at anyone as I said, I'm not asking for your blessing. I'm giving you a final chance to do what's right. No one responded. No denial. No apology. Just silence. Heavy. Telling. I closed the folder, slipped it back into my bag, and turned to leave. Back in my car, I sat for a moment, engine off, both hands on the steering wheel. I didn't cry, didn't shake, I exhaled. Monday morning, I walked into Dana's office with the same folder. The label now read, Rayner v. Verne, Theft, Defamation, Emotional Distress. She glanced at the label, then at me. Ready? I nodded. No more permission. It had been less than 72 hours since I walked out of Dana's office, folder in hand, case officially filed. The sun hadn't risen or set differently. The mail still arrived late, but something in the air shifted, an undercurrent. Quiet, but palpable. Like the moment right before the power goes out and everything pauses, just for a second. That morning, I was making coffee when my phone buzzed 3 times in rapid succession. I glanced down. News alerts. Civil family dispute between 2 sisters, one claiming theft of a family heirloom valued over $250,000. I nearly dropped the mug. Local news. A daytime segment with soft jazz in the background and a warm-toned anchor introducing it like it was a lifestyle piece. Family Feud, Jewel Edition. The graphic flashed between old stock images of sapphires and blurred footage of me at the party. And then, Callista. Perfectly lit, carefully composed. I just think it's heartbreaking, she told the camera. Family matters should be handled with grace. I've always tried to keep peace, but some people just want attention. I watched the screen, my jaw locked. She had leaked the lawsuit, framed the entire thing as an outburst from the unhinged sister desperate for relevance. On her Instagram, she followed up with a post, a soft shot of her meditating on a sunlit patio, captioned, Some sisters fight for attention, I fight for peace. There were already a few hundred comments, mostly in her favor, some strangers defending me, quoting back her old posts with skepticism. But the damage was done. She'd gone public. I didn't reply. Not to her, not to the media. I just added another file to the Legal in Motion folder. Public slander, media strategy. That evening, as I sat reviewing evidence to prep for Dana's next move, my phone lit up again. It was from Chloe, my niece, Callista's daughter. Dee, I saw Mom take your necklace. She said not to tell anyone. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for what felt like hours. Then another ping, an audio file. I played it, Chloe's voice, barely a whisper. I didn't know it was wrong at first. Mom said it was a prank, but I saw her put it in her clutch at the party. She told me not to tell anyone or she'd take my phone. I'm really sorry. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I saved the file in a new folder labeled Witness, Family. I wasn't going to use it, not yet, but it existed now. Like everything else. Ellison called me that night. She thinks she can smear you first, he said, no greeting necessary. She has no idea what's coming. She's afraid, I answered. She's arrogant, he corrected. Both, I said quietly. Let her dig. The deeper she goes, the harder she'll fall. Dana called the next morning. We're prepping for subpoenas, guest footage, event photographers, catering crew, anyone who might have captured peripheral shots. You okay with your name becoming part of the docket? I already lost everything that mattered in that family, I told her. My name is all I have left. After the call, I stood in the middle of my apartment. The sunlight was soft that morning, filtered through the blinds like it was trying not to intrude. And still, my mind wandered, back to childhood. I remembered drawing sketches in my room, only to find them ripped to pieces when I returned from school. Callista had denied it, of course. Why would I care about your ugly little drawings? I remembered asking my parents about it, only to be met with, just let her have it, Sabrina. She's going through a lot. Don't make it worse. Years of being told to give in, to not make things harder, to keep the peace. But keeping the peace had always meant keeping my mouth shut. Now, silence was my loudest protest. I opened the legal folder again, reviewed Chloe's audio once more, and then added one final line to the case notes. Intentional concealment by Callista Verne. Witness, minor. Statement preserved. That night, as I finished preparing a timeline for Dana, my phone buzzed again. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Just one line. Drop it now or lose everything. I stared at the message. No name, no punctuation, just threat wrapped in economy. I didn't flinch. I didn't block it. I screenshotted it. Then forwarded it directly to Dana with a note. Received tonight at 9:04 p.m. Threat. Likely from opposing party or affiliated source. Ellison texted a few minutes later. Want me to dig? No need, I typed. They just told me exactly how scared they are. And then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened the blinds completely. Let the night come in. The courthouse smelled like old wood, coffee, and something sterile, probably leftover tension from decades of legal grievances. As I stepped inside with Ellison by my side, I could feel the stillness in my chest shifting. Not nerves, just awareness. The awareness that I had crossed a threshold, one I could never step back over. There weren't many people in the gallery. A couple of reporters sat near the back with discreet notepads, pretending not to be there for the drama. Dana sat at the plaintiff's table, shuffling through documents with her usual calm. And then, across the room, Callista. She walked in like she was arriving at a gala, white blazer, tailored slacks, not a hair out of place. Her expression was unreadable, polished to the point of perfection. A PR advisor followed behind her, whispering something into her ear. Her attorney, a slick man in a pale gray suit, adjusted his tie and nodded toward the judge's bench. We didn't speak. We didn't exchange glances. We weren't sisters in this room. We were plaintiff and defendant. When the session began, the judge, a woman in her early 60s with reading glasses halfway down her nose, asked us to rise, then gestured for Dana to begin. Dana stood with the ease of someone who knew her case was airtight. Her voice was firm, but never raised. She laid out the facts with quiet authority. The necklace, the video, the inheritance documents, the appraisals, the media fallout. She paused, then placed a final envelope on the table. Your Honor, we also have a statement from a minor, Callista Verne's daughter, submitted under sealed witness protection, as advised by the court. A rustle swept across the room. Callista stiffened, her mouth tightening just enough to crack the mask she wore. Then it was my turn. I took a breath and stepped forward. I didn't come here today because I wanted attention. I began, eyes steady on the judge. I came because I wanted the truth to matter. This case isn't about jewelry, it's about legacy. It's about how families decide who matters and who doesn't. I unfolded Evelyn's letter and placed it in front of the judge. My grandmother saw me, when no one else did. I didn't cry. I didn't crack. Callista's attorney objected, tried to minimize the footage, question the valuation, imply confusion. But Dana countered every point with clarity and facts. No drama, no raised voices, just truth. When the ruling came, it was swift. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Sabrina Rayner. The defendant, Callista Verne, is ordered to return the stolen necklace within 7 business days, pay restitution for damages incurred, and issue a formal apology to be made publicly within 30 days. A hush fell over the room. Callista didn't move. Her face didn't flinch. But I saw it. The tiniest tremor at her jawline. The press didn't flood us outside. Just 2 microphones, 1 camera. Dana declined to comment. Ellison stood beside me, his presence enough. Callista walked past me without a word, her PR rep following like a shadow. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. 2 weeks later, the necklace arrived in a secure envelope delivered to my attorney's office. It looked exactly the same, but something in me had changed forever. I held it in my hand and didn't feel pride or vindication. I just felt done. That same week, Callista's brand, her carefully curated image, her speaking engagements, her influencer contracts began to crumble. Sponsors pulled out quietly, one by one, no official statements, just silence. But social media said what the legal system didn't. Stolen legacy, how truth matters. Justice for Sabrina. A national women's group reposted the story with the caption, "Believe quiet women." The backlash trickled from her brand into my parents' small chain of home furnishing shops. One major client backed out of a commercial contract. My father's voice, usually full of command, now sounded unsure. Then came the message from my mother. "Sabrina, can we talk? Just us?" I didn't reply. 3 days later, one more. "We need a favor, just a small loan. We're short with legal fees. We won't make it through the quarter." I stared at the message for a long time, then replied simply, "You taught me to be silent. Now let your silence teach you." No follow-up, nothing, until she showed up. Callista, at my door. No makeup, hair pulled back, expensive coat still draped over her shoulders like she couldn't decide whether to come in or walk away. I opened the door but didn't invite her inside. "You've ruined everything," she said. Her voice was hollow, like she didn't know whether to yell or beg. "Happy now?" I shook my head. "No, but I'm finally free." She stared at me, something sour curling her lip. "You were always the mistake. And yet I'm the one standing." I shut the door without slamming it. That would have been giving her something. Later that night, I opened my phone and quietly deleted the group chat that had haunted me for years. Every meme, every thread, every silence, gone. Then, I opened my laptop and created a new document. Title: Legacy Begins Here. The rain had stopped just before dawn, and when I stepped outside that morning, the world still shimmered with the evidence of it. Drops clung to the edges of the porch railing, each one catching the soft light like a bead of glass. The concrete path leading down to the gravel glistened under the pale gray sky. It smelled of damp earth and salt, that distinct blend you only find near the ocean. There was a quietness in the air, but not the kind that feels lonely. This was different. This stillness felt earned, like a truce between the chaos of the past and the tentative promise of the present. The kind of calm that doesn't come because things are perfect, but because I had finally stopped expecting them to be. It had been 5 months since the final ruling. Long enough for the newspapers to lose interest, long enough for the rumors to dull into silence, and long enough for the silence itself, from my family, from the people who once dictated my every move, to stop feeling like exile and start feeling like freedom. I stood on the porch of the little cottage I now called home, just a block and a half from the ocean in Encinitas. A place that didn't carry their fingerprints, their shadows, or their accusations. In front of me, the lavender I had planted in the spring was beginning to bloom, fragile purple blossoms opening themselves to the salt wind. I cupped a mug of hot tea in both hands and let the steam rise against my face. Here, no one knew me. No one called me too emotional. No one dismissed me as the quiet one. No one looked at me with that gaze that always seemed to measure how close I was to failing them. Anonymity, for the first time in my life, was a gift. I had chosen this place for a reason. Encinitas reminded me of Evelyn. She had always spoken of living by the sea one day, of waking to the sound of waves and falling asleep to the call of gulls. Her house, years ago, had carried the constant scent of lavender from the bushes she tended by her porch. The memory of her lingered in the salt air and the lavender buds outside my own window now. It felt right, as if I had circled back to something she'd once dreamed for me. 2 months earlier, I had signed the papers formally removing myself from the Rayner Family Trust. Notarized, filed, final. For some, it might have looked like a loss of money or security, but for me, it was liberation. It wasn't about the wealth. I'd learned the hard way how little wealth meant when tied to people who weaponized it. It was about reclaiming my story, declaring on paper that I would no longer be bound to them in name, in finances, or in expectation. I sent the certified letter to my parents' home without ceremony. Inside, I had written just one line. I'm choosing peace, not punishment. I forgive you, but I no longer belong to you. They never responded, and I never expected them to. Callista, of course, issued her statement through a publicist. It was bland, polished, stripped of any admission or humanity. I regret any misunderstanding that may have arisen regarding family matters. That was the best she could muster. A misunderstanding, as though my life had been nothing more than a clerical error. But by then, I didn't need her words to carry weight. I didn't need her to mean them, expecting decency from people who had shown me, over and over, who they truly were. That was a waste of breath. My days here became simple, slow, steady. I woke early, brewed tea, and wrote in my journal until the sun rose higher over the water. I walked the beach at low tide, collecting shells worn smooth by the ocean, and let the salt wind untangle the last knots of dread in my chest. I worked remotely for a nonprofit out of Santa Barbara, helping women rebuild their finances after escaping abusive families. The work wasn't glamorous, and it would never make headlines, but it mattered. Every time I helped someone open a bank account or untangle debts in her name, I felt a quiet kind of usefulness I hadn't known in years. Ellison came by now and then, never for long, never to stir up old wounds. He brought groceries once, another time a stack of secondhand books he thought I'd enjoy. On one visit, as we sat drinking coffee on the porch, he said something that stayed with me. "You fought back without screaming," he said, watching the horizon. "That's what shook them the most." I nodded. Screaming would have made it easy for them to dismiss me, to play the victim again. He looked at me for a long time, then added, "You scared them more by standing still." He wasn't wrong, but even now there were moments when the old ache returned. At the farmer's market, seeing a mother embrace her grown daughter, their laughter effortless, or overhearing sisters clinking glasses of wine, teasing each other with a familiarity I had never known. In those moments, some part of me still asked the old question, why couldn't that have been us? And every time, I reminded myself of the truth. I had spent decades trying to belong to a family that had no interest in making space for me, except in the narrow role they had scripted, the quiet one, the helper, the scapegoat when necessary, but never an equal, never someone whose presence was chosen, no more. Later that morning, after my walk, I opened Evelyn's letter again, the one I had read so many times that the paper had grown soft, though the ink remained bold. Her words were a balm I carried everywhere. You, my dear, simply needed to be seen. I folded it carefully and placed it back in the wooden memory box on my shelf. Inside that box were the few artifacts I chose to keep. A photograph of Evelyn and me baking bread in her warm kitchen, The original insurance appraisal she'd left me, and a piece of sea glass I'd found on the beach my first week in Encinitas. On the lid, I had stuck a strip of masking tape with 3 words written in black ink. Not broken, just different, because that was the truth of it. I had not emerged unscarred. But scars do not mean you are shattered. Scars mean you endured, and I had come out of it whole. That afternoon, the familiar metallic clatter of the mailbox startled me. Barefoot, I walked down the gravel path, enjoying the cool dampness of the earth beneath me. Inside was a single envelope, handwritten, no return address, but the moment I saw the looping letters on the front, my breath caught. Chloe. I opened it slowly, heart thudding, bracing for whatever it might hold. Inside, just a few lines. Dee Dee, I want to know who you really are. Can we talk? Love, Chloe. I stood there a long time, letter trembling in my hand as the ocean breeze curled around me. For so long, I had believed legacy ended with truth, exposing it, naming it, refusing to let lies shape me anymore. But holding Chloe's letter, I realized something else. Legacy doesn't end with truth. It begins with who you choose to carry it forward. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to begin again. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from those who call you family. Sabrina's story reminds us that silence isn't always peace, and speaking up doesn't make you the problem. It makes you powerful. Have you ever had to walk away from people you once called your own? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about courage, betrayal, and reclaiming your worth.